There's a rumor going around. If you like this video and subscribe, you will have to start preparing for your Chunin exams. I hope you stored all the powers from previous videos. Hi guys, this is the next part of What if Itachi Uchiha was reincarnated in the world of fairy tale. I hope you enjoy. Celebration was well underway in Ishgar for our friends in fairy tale. Although meanwhile, their enemy in the upcoming war, the Alvarez Empire, was making their own plan of invasion. Within the imperial palace of the Spriggan Emperor, also known as the immortal Black Wizard Zirf. In her own private quarters, Brandish, one of the Spriggan 12, looked out from the balcony of her room. Admiring the stars blinking in the black night sky, the thought of failure in her mission to capture the spies nagging in the back of her mind. Ah, Miss Brandish, you will always be a pass in my book. Sensing his master in distress, her pet Marin said in an attempt to raise her mood. Yet unknowingly he only worsened it with his voice sounding creepy in Brandish's ears. More so, Brandish was infuriated that her second in command of her forces turned out to be useless in the battle against the wizards of fairy tale. Get on your knees, Brandish commanded, and Marin, like a loyal dog, quickly obeyed, sensing the displeasure in her tone of voice. Marin, remind me again of your skills. Mistress Brandish, I am a space magic specialist. I command the space of Ethernano around us. Marin sweated a bit nervously, wondering if he was in trouble due to Brandish asking that question out of nowhere. Is that so? Then tell me this, my dearest pet. How is it that you, a space mage specialist, lost to Celestial Wizard and that frail-looking bookworm? Brandish shot a glare from the corner of her eye as her back was turned to Marin. Feeling the weight of Brandish's gaze, Marin felt small and trembled in fear. Marin feeling small suddenly became a reality, as his very body shrank into the size of a doll. Brandish-sama, what are you doing? Marin whimpered in fear. Brandish responded by slamming her bare foot before him. The force of her foot knocking Marin over. Brandish then tossed him a bottle of nail polish and presented her right foot. Make yourself useful and do my nails, Brandish demanded as she looked down upon him like he was a worm. Why yes, with all my heart I shall paint these nails. Ah, what a wonderful ravishing leg. Again, you pass. Marin, seeing himself out of danger, instantly complied with his mistress' order. But why shrink me? Failure requires punishment. No. Be grateful that this is all I am doing to you. At this, Marin grumbled a little under his breath as he began painting her nails. The doors of her room opened. Without any warning or announcement, in walked Demaria, a fellow member of the 12. Yo, Randy, Demaria casually greeted and waltzed in. Mari, Brandish barely shifted her gaze in Demaria's direction, and quickly went back to reading her magazine while Marin painted her nails. I heard through the grapevine you and Agil both encountered the Emperor's Little E project. And that you let him get away. Demaria had a tiny smirk spread across her lips, her eyes hungrily looking at Brandish. I didn't let them get away. Brandish slight angrily pouted. Ah, such a cute-looking expression. Demaria giggled a bit. Makes me feel playful. Ah, Miss Demaria, you two are a pass, the tiny Marin greeted, although the warrior princess didn't even acknowledge him with a glance. Turn that poor sod back to his original size. He reminds me of a gross bug. Makes me want to squish him. Demaria walked towards Brandish, her foot looming over the terrified doll-sized Marin, threatening to squash him. Brandish smiled a bit, and with a snap of her fingers Marin returned to his original size. The sudden expansion causing Marin's back to be pushed up against Demaria's foot, which almost knocked her out of balance. Ah, this kind of treatment isn't too bad from Demaria-sama. Marin looked pleased that he was stepped on. Demaria and Brandish both looked a bit disgusted. And before Marin knew it, he was suddenly sitting outside the room. The door closed and locked behind him. Demaria-sama. Brandish-sama, don't leave me out of the fun, Marin pleaded, although was suddenly knocked back by an unknown force. Feeling like he had been kicked in the stomach, Marin was sent flying across the hallway and knocked into a brick stone wall, bumping his head, knocking him unconscious. That takes care of the bug. Inside Brandish's room, Demaria is seen dusting off her hands. Now we're alone, Randy. How annoying, Brandish mumbled under her breath. Kya. Brandish suddenly squeals as at blinding speed Demaria is now standing behind her, her hands having slipped under Brandish's top and groping her breasts. Demaria's soft pink lips move closer to Brandish's ear, her hot breath sending quivers down the country demolisher's spine. HNGH. Brandish groans a bit as Demaria softly nibbles at her ear. I love it when you fight back a bit, Demaria whispers in a seductive tone. Don't mock me, you on. Despite her looking annoyed, Brandish is blushing a bit as she tried to muffle her moans. Enough. Brandish slaps Demaria's hands away, and the warrior princess merely giggles as she backs away. You really are the best, Randy. Demaria smiles teasingly and Brandish merely pouts at her. We'll have time to continue later, His Majesty is expecting us at the meeting. Meanwhile, with the wedding party having finished up, and everyone had made a toast for the happy couple, Itachi was standing in the middle of the guild, telling something to one of his crows. I am counting on you. Itachi performed a reverse summoning, and his crow vanished in a puff of smoke. The mood quickly shifted as the war was closing in on them. Before anything, I recommend we make a plan together with the Magic Council. We'll need an army to counter the Alvarez Empire. Might as well bring the full force of our own nation. Itachi quickly gathered to talk things over with Makarov and Mest. Indeed, we don't have much time, so we should leave immediately. The council should be able to get word out to the other magic guilds to prepare them all for the upcoming battle. Mest agreed. Not to mention to evacuate the civilians. Makarov added, Mest, teleport me and Itachi to the Magic Council's headquarters this instant. In the background, standing there looking rather nervous, was Itachi's wife Mira Jane. She felt like she had a lump in her throat, her legs quivering and nearly about to give in. She had to tell him, she had to tell Itachi she was carrying their child. Bracing herself, Mira Jane reaches out to her husband. Itachi, I need to have a word with you. Mira quickly regrets her wording. Oh no, did I make it sound like I was upset with him? This is supposed to be a happy moment and I made it seem so deadly serious. I'm such an idiot. Mira. Itachi looked a bit puzzled at the face his wife was making. Why did she look so nervous? Was it because they were about to go to war? Just before Mira can say another word, Mest interrupts them. Sorry, but we have to leave now. There is no telling when the Alvarez Empire will begin their attack. Right, Itachi nodded, realizing the seriousness of this matter. Sorry, we'll talk more when I return. Itachi gives Mira Jane a quick kiss before he heads over to Mest and Makarov. And before Mira can even protest, Mest teleports them away. Mira Jane stands there in silence, looking in defeat. Everyone too occupied to discuss their plan of defense from the upcoming invasion of the Empire. Mira Jane holds her hands over her stomach area, soothingly rubbing it as she feels the pure magic power building up inside of her. The magic of her unborn child. We'll find another time to tell him I'm pregnant. Mira gently and soothingly whispers as if she is talking to her child. The only one in the guild noticing this, being Myra's own younger sister Lizana. Mira nay, she quietly whispers, feeling a bit frustrated with Itachi for having to leave so suddenly. Although she understood why, so did Mira Jane. It still left a bitter taste in the youngest Strauss's sibling's mouth. Back within the Imperial Palace in the capital of the Alvarez Empire, Zirf had gathered his elite squad, the Spriggan 12. Sitting at a round table with 13 chairs, Zirf sitting a bit away from the rest, as if they all were seated like they were gathered around him. It seems we're only missing one. Zirf eyed the empty chair at the table, and across from the other side of the table, August glared at the empty seat in anger. Irene, August growled under his breath. Expecting Zirf to be angry, they were surprised as Zirf's mood had shifted. Oh well, at such a short notice this is a respectable turnout. Zirf sighed and merely shrugged as 11 of the 12 were still gathered. Irene still shouldn't disobey a direct order from His Majesty. Inbal interjected. It is fine, Zirf assures. Quit being a stick in the mud, Inbal. Just start the meeting with whoever is here already. I want to quickly have rematch against Makarov's soldiers. Agil leaned back in his seat and put his feet onto the table. I'm sure you all have realized, but the time has finally come to begin our invasion of Ishgar. And with that, the meeting had begun. Your Majesty, I think we should focus on a more significant threat. Brandish voiced out, earning the full attention of the other 12 as well as their emperor. Zirf looked like he already knew what she was going to say. Unless we deal with him first, our goal to take Fairy Heart will be far more difficult. We need to deal with Madara Uchiha now. You know, I actually second that. I would love to fight him. Agil smirked. I agree as well. Demaria looked also intrigued at the thought of fighting such a powerful foe. Demaria also shot a wink at Brandish, to which she blushed a bit and avoided Demaria's gaze. You underestimate Madara. Unless I have Fairy Heart, Even if all the 12 team up with me to fight him, we'll fail. Zirf declared, earning a few glances from some of the 12 that looked a bit insulted at having their power questioned. In particular, Agil. Bullshit, we can take him. Even without you, your majesty. Agil loudly declared. I think we should also take Acnology into consideration. A young blonde-haired man with upward spiky hair. A white cross symbol dawned onto his forehead, with his sharp piercing red eyes looking confidently, adding with his aura that seemed divine and godly. His clothing consisting of a golden-colored kasaya with a rectangular pattern similar to Natsu's scarf covering one half of his body leaving the other exposed. A white sash is also tied around the upper part of the garb, that streaks to hip to go on with one around his waist as well. The mark of the empire residing on his left shoulder. His lower body clothed in dark-colored capris to go with his dark shoes. And to top it off, a human-sized sharp cross hovering behind him with the sunlight reflecting off its surface adding more to this man's divine appearance. Larcade, with your abilities I think Acnology won't prove too difficult to keep at bay. Zirf looked to the divine-looking Spriggan member, Larcade Dragneel. Zirf then turns to the possible wildcard of the 12. God Serena, will it be painful for you to attack your homeland? Painful, absolutely not. The man rose from his chair, presenting himself in a dramatic fashion with a spotlight shining over him. God Serena had wavy spiky orange hair that juts out at the top giving them a similar shape to rabbit ears. His eyebrows are slightly thick, and he bears a scar going across the bridge of his nose. Weirdo. Brandish comments on God Serena's performance. Unfazed by this comment, God Serena continues to pose and points towards Brandish. I'll take that as a compliment. This man was once said to be the strongest man in Ishgard. He is dressed in a fanciful white robe with long dark blue sleeves, with a matching belt and pants. His neck area and shoulders covered by a red cloak with a high collar. And floating around his back is a wheel of blades. Sitting in silence during the meeting is a tall bulky muscular figure wearing a black torn cloak with a hood going over his head covering most of his face except for his jaw. Although his jaw resembled that of a skeleton, underneath his cloak he wears bulky dark and red demonic-like armor plates. This beast is named simply Bloodman, his cold breath visible in the air. The beast growled a bit, and underneath his hood one could see his piercing eyes looking up at his emperor. Your Majesty, just give the order and I will execute it to perfection without flaw. As always, so loyal Bloodman. Zirf gave an emotionless smile at his servant. I should be more than enough to take down Ishgard. A man sitting in the far back, sounding a bit arrogant, spoke up. A slender-looking man with long purple hair pulled into a ponytail, his purple eyes looking as arrogant as his voice sounded. With my magic, they all shall perish. I am a one-man army after all, the man chuckled. He was wearing a suit of green armor over a yellow frilly shirt. Neinhardt, I have plans for you for this war. You will need to stay away from the front lines to utilize your magic. Zirf declared, showing great faith in Neinhardt's abilities. Back off, corpse boy, I alone will attack these weaklings in Ishgard. Agil confidently declared. No, this is an all-out war. You alone cannot deal with this. Zirf instantly shot down Agil's suggestion. Besides, if I am going to defeat Mavis and her little soldiers, it will be more meaningful if we all do it together. Oh, a way of showing respect for your beloved. A man looking to be around middle-aged hummed as he twirled a glass of whiskey in his hand. He had short black hair and a stubby beard. On his wide forehead there was a tattoo mark of a death skull. He wore a purple spandex turtleneck underneath a black blazer with matching black pants. His hands were covered with black gloves with oval design of knuckles. In a way, I suppose you could look at it that way, Jacob. Zirf looked laid back as he hummed at the idea. A smirk creeping up on his lips. Or perhaps, I wish to crush her resolve and spirit with everything I got, sometimes I simply cannot decide. So bottom line, our target is the body of your former love. My such a deep sinful act. A voice that sounded almost a bit robotic chuckled at the idea. A tall-looking man with an oddly shaped body. His arms were unnaturally long and his face oval-shaped and seemingly no nose. A single strand of hair sticking up like an antenna. He was dressed in a long-sleeved black high-collar open jacket, with a striped shirt underneath and a camouflaged patterned scarf. This was the final Spriggan member present at the meeting, Wal Ito. Fairy Heart is a magic, not a person. Mavis may be the host of this magic, but that is irrelevant. Our objective involves obtaining Fairy Heart, but my desire is the complete and utter annihilation of Ishgard. and with it, the very fabric of reality. Zeref's eyes turned red, his malice leaking out from him, bringing cold beads of sweat to his own elite force. Even an ice mage like Inval felt a cold shiver at the presence of his emperor's might. Humanity, huh? Demaria hummed, seeming rather intrigued. We are mere pawns for your usage, your majesty. We'll fight, and throw our lives away if you give the order. August's declaration showed his full loyalty to Zeref. Quite an interesting explanation, although it would mean our destruction as well, no? Walito didn't sound displeased at this, in fact he seemed interested. Brandish merely remained silent, while silently thinking to herself. With this reality destroyed, I can continue in a new with. A flashing image of an older-looking green-haired woman came to Brandish's mind. Perfect. God Serena seemed excited at Zeref's declaration. Now, all that is left is to decide. Who amongst us shall lead the first assault? Inval looked amongst the other Spriggan members, and as expected Ajil instantly stood up. Me, of course. I will bury them all. Ajil was quick to volunteer, although not the only one. I shall also join in. Demaria stabbed a golden dagger through a map on the table, her blade piercing at the map over Ishgar, in particular the port town of Harjan. I shall also join in on this invasion, Walito declared. I will go, Brandish declared, looking a bit bored. The quicker we get it done, the better. It's been decided then, Inval declared, hearing no objection from the others. I will use my time to prepare my own little army, Neinhardt declared. I shall keep a lookout for Acknowledgia, God Serena and Jacob shall accompany me. August declared, the other two gladly willing to accompany him. And I shall stand by your side, your majesty. Inval lowered his head as he looked to Zeref. Very well, Larcade and Bloodman. The two of you find Irene and inform her of our plan. She will know what to do once the battle begins. Zeref assigned the task of finding their missing member to the divine-looking Larcade, and the demonic-looking Bloodman. Then you two will join in on the battle as well. It shall be done. Larcade happily smiled as he accepted his task. Irene was last reported to be in Ishgar anyway. Suits us perfectly. Bloodman stood tall. Splendid. Make sure to strike swiftly, before Madara or Acknowledgia gets a chance. Zeref smiled with glee as the final battle was about to begin. I look forward to seeing you again, Mavis, and of course you as well, Natsu. On an island devoid of any form of life, with the exception of one, was a lone man with long spiky messy dark blue hair. His skin tanned and body muscular. His eyes sharp and filled with the look of killer intent. The sides of his face looked like it had dragon scales. He wore a mere torn cloak that blew in the wind, revealing he was missing an arm. His pants were just as torn as his cloak. And around his neck, he had a necklace that looked to be made of dragon teeth. My arm tingles, my left arm, the one taken by the flame dragon. The figure stomped his foot into the ground, causing the very island to explode. The pressure released from him caused the island to break and fall apart. The man's body began to mutate, expand in size. His very shape altering, wings bursting out from his back. The shadow he cast looked less and less human by the second, until it finally took the shape of a dragon. The Dragon King Festival. I shall devour all, for I am the true king of all dragons. The ultimate creation. I am Acknowledgia. His very voice turned deeper, and echoed across the island in a violent roar. As he took flight, the island sank into the ocean. Once the meeting was over, the confident-looking Neinhardt walked out with his head held up high. Did you get all that? Neinhardt spoke into what appeared to be an earpiece in his right ear. Well done. As promised, I shall help you become a true master of life and death. The sound of a gentle deep voice responded from the other end. A voice that would have made anyone's blood run cold. Make sure to use what I have taught you properly now. Of course, I am quite grateful for you teaching me how to improve my magic. Although, make no mistake, if the Emperor commands it, I shall fight you as well. But until then, I will do my best to make an opening for you. In return I wish to learn the perfect way to control the dead. I shall teach you how to use the Edo Tensei if you succeed. As promised, with that combined with your Historia, you shall create a spell that truly exceeds the boundary of life and death. Just make sure to make good use of the imperfect version I showed you first to get the job done. Splendid. Pleasure doing business with you, Madara. Neinhardt hung up, and crushed the earpiece within his grip to dispose of the evidence. Neinhardt entered a great hall, filled with his own soldiers. Greetings everyone, you are all about to become a part of a marvelous experiment. A snarky smirk spread across his arrogant-looking face. What? The knights looked confused, and then quickly one by one the doors around the hall shut themselves closed. And the room was filled with a dark purple glow of magical power, coming from Nineheart. Historia, Tensai, what followed were the cries of despair that went like a ghostly echo throughout the palace, although the cries themselves were drowned out by the sound of Nineheart's cackling maniacal laughter. Later that night, before the invasion would begin, the army of the Empire were resting up, and gathering their strength. In the room of Brandish, the country demolisher laid in her bed, naked as the day she was born. Only covered by her bed sheets. The sound of rustling coming from next to her, holding onto her body was Demaria, also in her birthday suit. Can't sleep. Demaria locked eyes with Brandish, admiring the country demolisher's deep eyes and long eyelashes. What do you think of His Majesty's plan? To destroy the fabric of reality? Brandish casually asked, her expression remaining stoic. I think it sounds fun. Why, don't you? Demaria leaned in, and began kissing Brandish's neck gently and slowly moving downward. Brandish flinched a bit and her face a little flushed. I want His Majesty to succeed. This reality doesn't have much to offer me anyway. Brandish carefree sighed, although her voice didn't sound as confident in her words. That's kinda cold, Randy. I'm right here. Demaria gave a light chuckle as she planted her lips onto Brandish's. We both know what this is. Brandish looked cold and stoic as usual, although Demaria did not dislike that about her. A way to release pent-up feelings. If you call it anything else, I will get annoyed and kick your sorry ass out. Hey, that attitude of yours is exactly why people dislike you. Excuse me, I am the one who dislikes people, thank you very much. Brandish coldly glared at Demaria, who looked a bit turned on by that answer. And that is exactly why we get along. The two cuddled up together for the remainder of the night. Meanwhile, Ishgar was undergoing their own strategy planning to counterattack. Itachi, Makarov and Mest arrived within the headquarters of the Magic Council. All the other 8 members of the 10 Wizard Saint, 9 now that Makarov was present, had gathered. According to plan, Warren back in the guild used his telepathy to contact the entire country. At this moment, the Wizard Saints all heard the warnings every citizen of the nation was getting broadcasted into their minds. All civilians were warned to take shelter and evacuate the big cities. And pleading for all magic guilds, the Royal Army, the Rune Knights, and for the Magic Council to join the war against the Alvarez Empire. Itachi calmly stood before the 4 main leaders of the council. Hyberian, Wolfheim, Warad and Jura. Now that you understand the current situation at hand, surely you will agree to aid us in this battle. Itachi's calm demeanor was baffling for Mest, especially considering the look he got from Hyberian and Wolfheim. Oi, brat, you mean to tell me you started a fight against the Alvarez Empire? Wolfheim trembled in anger, growing into his monster form and standing tall over Itachi. Yet the young Uchiha wasn't intimidated, unlike Mest, who would have cowered behind Makarov had he not been so short. The war was going to start regardless of my actions, Itachi boldly declared as he stared the 2 Wizard Saints down. And what makes you think that? Although our relationship with the Western continent has been rather unstable, even they wouldn't dare to attack. Itachi sighed, knowing they were going to list the various weapons the council had at their disposal to hold of the empire. The man known as the Emperor Spriggan is Zirf. Once Itachi revealed that, they all fell in silence. It was the exact reaction Itachi had hoped for. He knew that even the 10 Wizard Saints realized their weapons wouldn't even face an immortal being. And if the legends about Zirf served him any justice, they knew he wouldn't care about sacrificing his own soldiers. Makarov here is a witness. He met the Emperor face to face. The Wizard Saints looked at their colleague, whose stern face said it all. It was indeed true. The Black Wizard known as Zirf is indeed the Emperor of the Western continent. He also told me the reason they halted their previous attack was simply because it wasn't the right time. But what is it he wants? Why build an empire? Wizard Saint Noel couldn't help but ask a question many of them were wondering. Why would someone who could kill anything that approached him need an army? I'm with Flatty here. What exactly is going on here? Mitsurugi rested his arm on top of Noel's head, who trembled in anger at the flat comment, so she blasted him with a blast of water, knocking him over. Zirf is after something that is in our guild's possession, Itachi revealed, to which Makarov looked outraged. Itachi, Makarov attempted to stop the new master of the guild. There is no point in keeping it a secret anymore. The truth will come out sooner or later, best to put our cards on the table now. To this the council members looked intrigued. Lumen Histoire, or rather, Fairy Heart, the oldest secret within our guild, only known to the guild's current and former masters. A source of infinite magic power. That is what the Alvarez Empire seeks to obtain. Ward even looked shocked, showing the other council members just how secret this weapon was. Why would your guild have such a thing? Something so dangerous must be dealt with immediately. Fiona spoke in outrage. They all could imagine just what kind of level of destruction an infinite source of magic power could bring if it fell into the hands of Zirf. How long has this secret existed, Makarov? Ward asked, wondering if it dated back to the very foundation of the guild. Which would have meant Mavis had kept him in the dark. Which honestly didn't sit well with the founding member. Since the time of the second Master Prect, Makarov didn't have the heart to tell Ward that Fairy Heart was the body of Mavis Vermilion. And as long as they asked, Itachi wouldn't reveal it either. We must still do something to dispose of this weapon of your guild, Hyborian declared, looking ready to demand Itachi to show him Fairy Heart. I won't let you, Makarov declared, using his giant magic to grow in size, to the point where he towered over monster form Wolfheim. I don't care if you are the current highest rank amongst the wizard saints. I will not let either of you near Fairy Heart, Makarov declared, obviously protectively to keep the first master's body safe from harm. Not to mention there is no way to dispose it. Destroying it could have dangerous consequences. We are talking about an infinite supply of magic power here. Our best bet is to keep it where it is, and protect it from the Alvarez Empire and any other who desire it. Itachi calmed the situation down a bit with his explanation. They all realized the gravity of the situation. The council knew they couldn't risk destroying Fairy Heart. The only course of action was to keep it sealed. Itachi Dono, surely you realize we cannot allow your guild to keep such a weapon. Jura calmly addressed Itachi, and the real issue the council had with Fairy Heart. The idea of a guild having that kind of power was unthinkable. I do, however, I suggest we discuss this matter after the war. After the Alvarez Empire has been defeated, then we can figure things out. The council members looked amongst themselves, seeming uncertain about their final decision. On one hand, they didn't have time to deal with Fairy Heart due to the war with the Alvarez Empire. On the other hand, they couldn't risk gambling the fate of the world shall they lose the war, and Zirf were to obtain the Fairy Heart. It's fine, isn't it? Walking out from the crowd of the 10 Wizard Saint, was the Amazonian woman Beatrice. Although, she seemed different. She seemed confident. The full moonlight shining onto her from the windows. She cupped her hands onto Itachi's face, surprising the young Uchiha. This boy clearly won't accept anything else besides us agreeing to his terms. Her gaze looked seductive and hungrily. I admire a man who takes control. She reached her hand down, and to Itachi's further surprise, she groped his butt and pushed his face in between her breasts. Especially one as firm as yourself. And my, such a rich source of energy. You should be able to handle a night with me, right? Cutie. Itachi looked confused. This is the same woman who was terrified of men, right? Itachi thought back to his first meeting with Beatrice. Her personality had done a complete 180. Beatrice, leave that poor boy alone. He's married. Makarov couldn't help but chuckle at this sight, imagining how Mira Jane would react to this. Ah, really? Beatrice pouted, and pulled Itachi out from her embrace. Such a shame. Oh well, tell Gildarts I said hello. Beatrice winked at Itachi, who was completely left speechless. What is more, what was Gildarts' relationship with this woman? Itachi was probably better off not knowing, although considering Gildarts' personality he can pretty much guess. So, are we all in agreement here? Makarov looked amongst his fellow wizard saints. Well, either way they will be attacking Ishgar as a whole. Might as well join the fight. Mitsurugi shrugged and walked over next to Makarov, signifying his side in all this. Beatrice followed as well, and so did Jura and Ward. It feels like I'm young again, Ward spoke with a hint of nostalgia over getting the chance to fight for the guild he helped build. After everything your guild has done, I will gladly aid you. Itachi Dono, Makarov Dono. Jura as well voiced his opinion. Hyborian, as the named leader of the council and the saints at this moment, was the one who had to make the decision. Seeing that Beatrice, Jura, Ward, Mitsurugi all seemed to have made their decision and aid Fairy Tail in this battle. Very well, we are in agreement. We shall discuss the matters of Fairy Heart after the war with Alvarez. TCH. Guess we have no choice. Wolfheim shrugged as he, Fiona and Noel agreed as well. You are a crafty brat, I will give you that. Springing this on us now. Wolfheim smirked, his tone carrying a hint of respect. Thank you. Itachi bowed in appreciation of them being willing to help in the upcoming war. Now, I would like to discuss strategy, and how we should divide our forces. Itachi may not look like it, but the kid has experience when it comes to war. Makarov casually mentioned as he scratched his beard. What do you propose then? Fairy Tail's 7th master. Ward broke the silence, everyone waiting in anticipation to hear Itachi's plan. Itachi looked to Mest and nodded, the mind manipulator mage looking a bit hesitant at first but nodded back and teleported away. I suggest we divide our forces into 6 groups. First thing we'll need is a headquarters to operate from. That shouldn't be a problem, we'll use the council headquarters. Noel suggested, as besides the royal palace it was the most guarded and secured area in Ishgar. No, we'll use the Fairy Tail Guildhall. Itachi's suggestion was met with a lot of raised eyebrows. After all, the Fairy Tail Guildhall contained the main goal of the enemy. Why exactly should we use the Fairy Tail Guildhall? The enemy will constantly be gunning for it, we'll be left vulnerable. Mitsurugi, although not a great thinker, knew battle, and the rest of the council seemed to be in doubt as well of this strategy. In our guild, we have a mage named Warren that can use telepathy to keep in contact with the other groups of our forces. And it is precisely because the Guildhall is the enemy's main goal that it needs protection. Making it our stronghold is the best chance to defend Fairy Heart. Makarov, Ward-sama, seeing as none know the secrets of the guild like you. I would like for the two of you to aid in its defense. Along a handful of other capable wizards that are to act as a backup unite, should any of the other groups be in need of reinforcements. Of course, you can count on me. Ward gladly accepted his given task, looking forward to stepping foot inside his old guild again. The largest groups will be the ones in the front lines. We'll need 2 defense squads, and 2 attack squads. Itachi threw down a marble-sized lacrima. The lights in the room dimmed down as the lacrima showed a hologram map over Fury. The 2 defense squads' jobs will be to defend Magnolia from the Alvarez Empire's forces. 1 squad will be stationed in Magnolia as a last line of defense. The other will be stationed at Harjan Harbor, to hold of the Alvarez warships coming by sea. The map then expanded, covering the majority of the continent of Ishgar. 2 arrows coming in from the north and the south side, representing the Alvarez forces. These are some attack routes that require the highest level of caution. If the Alvarez Empire attack from these sides, Fury will quickly be boxed in and forced to fight from every side. We'll be exhausted and in a matter of days wiped out. Therefore we require 2 attack squads to intercept the Alvarez Empire's forces, and prevent them from reaching Fury, whilst also pushing them back, and capture any outposts they might have made on some neighboring islands between our borders. This strategy was actually provided to Itachi by Mavis prior to them coming to meet the council. The incident on Caracal Island showed that Alvarez had prepared this war for quite some time. They have likely had their Imperial Navy place outposts on other islands near the border between Ishgar and Alakatasia. I see, then what about this 6th group? Fiona asked. Extra reinforcements from a kingdom me and my friends once helped. Let's just say I made contact with an old comrade asking for him to return the favor. Itachi smiled, his thoughts going to a former S-class wizard from Fairy Tail. Alright then, I suppose. One question remains, however, who is to lead these squads? Hyberian asked. It is common knowledge every squad and platoon in war had a commanding officer. I'm glad you asked. Anke Mest teleported back in, along with Laxus Drayar, who looked a little confused as to why he was brought here. Mest then came back, this time with Kagura Mikazuchi. I nominate Laxus Drayar to lead the defense squad in Magnolia, and I nominate Kagura Mikazuchi to lead the defense squad in Harjan. Both Laxus and Kagura looked confused. They had been slightly briefed by Mest on the way, but they had no idea they would be leading squads in battle. Oh, Kagura-chan, an excellent choice. Beatrice looked pleased that the star member of her guild was chosen for this task. Kagura flinched a bit, seeing her master, at night time. And seeing how she was eyeing not only Itachi but now also Laxus with a hungry lustful gaze. Master Beatrice. Kagura's panicked voice diverted the mermaid heel's master attention to her. Not to worry, Kagura-chan, seeing how serious the situation is I can restrain myself. A bit anyway. Beatrice licked her lips, causing Kagura to shiver. Itachi made a mental note to ask Kagura what was going on with the mermaid heel's master. Mest then returned, this time with Sting Eucliffe. Huh, What? Why am I here? Sting looked around confused as a moment ago he was having a drink with Lecter and Yukino. I also nominate Sting Eucliffe to lead the first attack squad against the Alvarez Empire's forces from the north side of Ishgar. Itachi's declaration brought a few shocked looks, but none as shocked as Sting. Wait just a minute here. You want me to lead a squad in the war against the Alvarez Empire? Why? Sting looked baffled. Why would someone like him lead a squad? Why can't you lead the squad? Sting thought Itachi would be a better choice to lead than him. Well, you are the guild master of the second strongest guild in the kingdom. I have faith in your leadership skills. And as for why I won't be leading the squad or any squad in general, I will come back to that later. I need to introduce the final squad leader. Considering some of Itachi's choices, the council half expected it to be Urza Scarlet. Yet the one who Mest arrived with proved otherwise. All of the council let out a gasp and looked outraged. Why? Mitsurugi gritted his teeth in anger, holding onto the hilt of his blade, as he and the rest of the council went into battle stance. Why would you bring that traitor? Wolfheim howled as he turned into his monster form, staring down at the man standing next to Mest. Jalal Fernandez. Because, I nominate Jalal Fernandez to lead the attack squad that will intercept the Alvarez forces coming from the south. Everyone looked on edge over Jalal being here, in particular Kagura. Although she had decided not to kill Jalal, she still wasn't comfortable being in his presence. Jalal has led an independent guild for the past few years to take down dark guilds across the continent. He has changed his ways. Itachi insisted, yet the council still protested. We cannot trust this traitor to lead one of our squads. He should be thrown in jail. Noel argued, as Jalal being a former wizard saint and council member they hadn't forgotten his betrayal 8 years ago. Jalal looked uncomfortable and tried to slowly back away. I will vouch for him. Itachi spoke up. If he betrays us, then you can hold me responsible for it. Itachi's words touched Jalal a bit. He looked grateful for Itachi showing such trust in him. Although he still didn't blame the council for distrusting him. I shall also vouch for him. Jura spoke up, which shocked Jalal even further. I can indeed say that he has changed. And if Itachi Dono has faith in him, then so do I. Jalal didn't understand, what had he done to earn Jura's trust? Indeed, not only has Jalal here taken down various dark guilds. He also aided us last year during the Eclipse incident. I would say we offer him this chance of redemption. Warad added. If he betrays us, and we survive this war, prepare to face punishment. Itachi Uchiha. Hyborian gave in, and glared at the young Uchiha. Well, thankfully it won't come to that. Itachi said smiling knowing full well that Jalal was trustworthy. Now, as for why I won't be leading any squads, and a second problem on our hands. Besides Zirf, there is another who seeks Fairy Heart. Madara Uchiha, my own ancestor, seeks Fairy Heart. The name held no meaning for the council, so they didn't understand the true gravity of the situation and what kind of threat Madara posed. From my experience, Makarov spoke up next to confirm Itachi's concerns for the council. Madara Uchiha is stronger than both Zirf and Acnologia. Now those names the council knew. And hearing such a claim, that there existed another being stronger than the greatest threats their nation has ever faced. What can you tell us of this, Madara? Warad asked, as the other members of the council also looked curious to know of this mysterious powerful warrior. Madara is the definition of a one-man army. He alone could fight against all our forces, and make it seem like a fair fight. I'm not even sure if I am able to beat him. That might actually be a good thing about this war. Madara will have two armies to deal with, making it more difficult for him. The council could tell Itachi genuinely feared Madara's power and the threat he posed for his family and friends. So what? You will avoid the battlefield and search for him? Jura asked. No, I will join Jalal and his attack squad at the south of Ishgar. I will also make clones of myself for every single group. One clone of me at headquarters to aid in strategy. And one for each squad. The reason I cannot be responsible for leading a squad, is because the moment Madara is sighted I will need to intercept him. If I was in charge of a squad, I would be abandoning them on the battlefield. That is my reasoning. Itachi, although unsure of his ability to defeat Madara, he knew he was the only one on their side that was able to fight him. They all looked rather understanding, well, some at least. Wolfheim, Fiona, Mitsurugi and Noel had a look that could only be described that they deemed Itachi to be arrogant. As it seems he overestimates his abilities and undermines theirs. Hyborian, however, despite not knowing Itachi well, did not get the same impression as his fellow council members and saints. He could tell there was something about this boy, he could see the sincerity and seriousness in Itachi's eyes. This was no child. This was a veteran experienced in the art of combat. Very well, we will begin making preparations at once. Following the announcement of the current chairman and the head of the Wizard Saints, they all got to work without a word of protest. They immediately contacted Warren, and had him organizing the various guilds and rune knights into each of the squads. Going by the chart given by Itachi, Warren had an easy time informing every guild wizard on the continent what their assignments and posts were. Hyborian had the rune knights begin dealing out supplies and such, setting up security around Magnolia. Laxus even putting up his Thunder Palace around the city to surprise attack the enemy when they arrived by air. Hiding the deadly thunder spheres within the clouds surrounding Magnolia. Freed preparing an enchantment barrier to defend the entire town. And the army even lending them a set of 2 Jupiter cannons stationed around Magnolia to use against any enemy airships. Before the enemy could surprise them, the forces of Ishgar had already begun their move. Each squad already in place for their assigned areas. Within the air, heading to the southern area of Ishgar onboard warships. Itachi and Jalal together oversaw their squad's equipment for the war, going from various airships thanks to Mest teleporting them onto them while midair. I have done as you asked and divided Crime Sorcier into each of the squads. But may I ask why not bring any of them with our squad? Simple. From my encounter I have figured that each of the Spriggan 12 are equal to members of the Akatsuki in power. The organization me, Kisame, Sasori and Kakuzu were a part of. Therefore having one of them in each squad puts me more at ease, that we have someone who can stand up to one of the 12. Itachi in his mind couldn't help but compare Brandish and Agil's level of power to the likes of Deidara, Conan, Sasori and Kakuzu. And why am I needed here? I should be back at the guild. Mest pointed out as he wasn't the battle type, and he could be used to move fairy hearts should the enemy breach their defenses. I need you to teleport me to where Madara is once he is spotted. Once that is done, you may return to oversee the safety of Fairy Heart if you so wish. Itachi couldn't afford to waste energy after all. If he had flown to where Madara was using his perfect Susanoo or his demonic powers, it would consume his energy. Not much, but he couldn't be too careful when it came to Madara. Alright, but remember I have a limited range and a limited number of times to teleport before I run out of magical power. Of course, there was that factor, but it would have to do. If Itachi was lucky, Madara would appear to face him directly. In the meantime, Jalal's mind was elsewhere. As he looked over at the neighboring warship, his gaze fixated on Urza standing tall by the steering wheel, her blade ready for combat. Her red hair blowing elegantly with the wind. The recent events of some of the Magic Council members, and his former comrades in the Wizard Saints showing an ounce of trust in him, made his mind drift into a potential future. Captain, a voice called out to Jalal, yet his gaze remained on Urza. Captain, at being called out a second time, Jalal snapped out of it. Jalal looked to Hibiki of Blue Pegasus, using his archive to calculate the potential route the Alvarez forces might take. My archive is picking up incoming warships in the distance. Hibiki warned. Friendly, or enemies, can't say. Natsu, do you mind scouting ahead? Hibiki shouted at the pink-haired dragon slayer, flying over them thanks to his little blue buddy Happy. No prob. Happy, full speed, Natsu smirked, as Happy picked up his speed, vanishing with Natsu in a flash of blue light. Captain, although I understand the desire for a woman like Lady Urza, maybe focus on the war for now. Hibiki gave Jalal a sympathetic smile, and Jalal blushing a bit over having been caught. Especially that Itachi gave a smirk at his reaction. Ready the artillery. Formation Dragon, Jalal ordered. His time in the council gave him some knowledge of the codes used by the Rune Knight's navy. Max, Nab, Lackey, get the rest of the ground forces ready to depart in the shuttles. Itachi ordered, and the trio rounded up various Rune Knight and Guild Wizard onboard shuttles that were hanging on the sides of the ships like lifeboats. Ready boys, let's get wild. Bacchus hung by his legs upside down from the mast of one of the airships. While everyone from the Quattro Cerberus Guild howled at their ace members' words. Even their master Goldmine joined in. It's been a while since I was in the fleet, but I still remember the basics. Eve from Blue Pegasus, being a former member of the army, was leading another of the warships. In the distance, Natsu had already begun as a massive explosion lightened beyond the clouds. Natsu's made contact with the enemy. Let's begin. Jalal commanded and the warships flew beyond the clouds, and right into a war zone. Magical bullets being fired from the hundreds of Alvarez warships, approaching both by air and sea. Base, this attack squad number 2. We've made contact with the enemy at the southern Isles of Ishgar. Itachi spoke through his earpiece. Any reported sightings of Madara yet? Itachi had to yell as one of their ships blew up from a fired blast from the Alvarez ships. The burning warship plummeting into the sea's bellow. Negative. Neither squad has reported any signs of Madara on the battlefield. Warren called from the main base that was the Fairy Tail Guild back in Magnolia. Within the guild, Makarov, Warad, Kanana, Lizana, Laxus and Mira Jane went through various intel as Lacrima maps were flashing red, having detected Alvarez forces approaching. Attack squad number 1, we're detecting a large number of enemy troops approaching from the mountains up north. Affirmative. Rufus of Sabretooth responded, as he stood with their squads Captain Sting and Yukino. All of them seeing a few warships approaching through the storm. We can't tell the exact number from our end. The snowstorm prevents us from getting a visual. Being the northern continent, the environment was harsh when it came to snowstorms. Further back in the squad, stood Gray along with Leon, Juvia, Ultir and Merity. The 3 ice wizards looking with a somewhat hint of nostalgia, as they all had emotional ties in this part of Ishgar. All thanks to the master of Gray and Leon and mother of Ultir. Feels weird, to be fighting back here, Gray's mind focusing on memories of a simpler time, both the good and the bad. In honor of our master, we shall not let the Alvarez Empire conquer this land. Leon put his hand onto Gray's shoulder, looking at him with brotherly affection. Gray-sama, are you sure you are alright? Juvia looked concerned. Sure, having the 3 ice wizards stationed at the coldest area on the continent made sense. But Gray still had many traumatizing memories from this place. Where his parents were killed, where he lost his master and despaired. Juvia, I am grateful to have you. Gray's sudden words startled the water wizard, although in a good way. You're always by my side. Juvia's face looked flushed as she wasn't sure how to answer her beloved. After this, I promise I will give you an answer. Good for you, Juvia. Merity cheered in a whisper tone, while Ultir smiled at seeing Gray and Juvia's relationship unfold. Makes her feel like a proud older sister. Why did I get stuck out here? Jenny from Blue Pegasus trembled from the cold wind, despite wearing a pink frilly winter coat. You couldn't wear something else that wouldn't have made you an obvious target, sweetie. The master of Blue Pegasus, Bob, looked concerned for Jenny, seeing as her pink coat stuck out like a sore thumb. I didn't have anything else that was cute and warm. Jenny replied. Bob sighed and used his magic to switch the color of the coat into a white color instead. Ah, master. Don't worry, the color will reset itself after a few days, darling. Bob smiled comfortingly at Jenny. Look sharp. Itachi's clone stepped up. With his Sharingan he saw the enemies approaching even through the snowstorm. Alright everyone, let's show these Empire jerks the might of fury. Sting roared and they all joined him in a cheer. Orga, Rogue and Minerva rushed up with an armada of wizards from Sabretooth. As enemy magic mobiles came rushing down the mountains, carrying Alvarez Imperial Knight. Sasori stood on standby, readying his puppets for an all-out assault. When suddenly he felt someone pulling at his coat. Serrano. Sasori stoically looked at his comrade from Crime Sorcier. Oddly enough, Serrano looked on edge, and like she was hiding. Sasori followed her gaze, to which his eyes landed on Yukino, who stood next to Sting. Someone you know? Sasori bluntly asks, but he isn't neat with a response. Whatever, just don't be pain and fight. Sasori shrugged, and Serrano gave him a mere nod of understanding. Jihi, let's go Lily. Gajiel charged with the now giant-sized muscular Panther Lily. The giant exceeded taking flight, flying alongside an enemy vehicle and slicing it in half with his sword. While Gajiel unleashed a breath attack to tear another magic mobile to shreds. Rolling out from the magic mobile Gajiel destroyed, was a knight who flung a lacrima bomb at the Iron Dragon Slayer. Solid script. Shield. Gajiel was instantly surrounded by a magical shield, thanks to Levi. Gajiel turned his head to the knight who flung the bomb, and spat out iron in the shape of a spike, penetrating it through the knight's skull. Thanks, Shrimp. Gajiel gave Levi a thumbs up. Even though he probably would have survived, he still offered his thanks. As the battle over the northern area of Ishgar also began, both armies were unaware that a third party was watching them. Only makes sense to begin my assault from here. After all, this is where I was robbed of the one, that I loved. Standing tall on the mountain top, was none other than Madara Uchiha. His Sharingan scanning for any strong warriors on the battlefield. Oh, 3 of the Spriggan nearby, and a few not too bad warriors on Ishgar's side. And it would seem, that a 4th player is approaching. Madara smirked, detecting Acknowledge's presence, although miles away Madara could tell it was the Dragon King. Madara's senses tingled, as he detected something. It felt familiar, yet also different. Madara's eyes traced over to Ishgar's side. At this point he wished he had binoculars so he could spot whoever he was sensing. This sensation, a perfect balanced mixture of chakra and ether nano. Unlike myself and that Itachi Uchiha whose chakra remains the dominant source of power, I sense 2 signatures like that here as well. One is a clone of Itachi, the other probably one of the former members of the Akatsuki. Madara's mind drifted, whoever this perfect balanced power-sourced being was. He or she possessed a great deal of both chakra and ether nano. Then who is it that I am sensing? Madara halts himself as a massive ice geyser bursts to life on the battlefield, taking out a great number of Alvarez forces with it. Ice maker magic. Madara's mind drifts over to his deceased lover and a certain photo of her with 2 young boys. Well, this suddenly got interesting. Madara smirked. Back in Magnolia, the defenses around the town had been set up. Alzak and Biska had each been stationed onto the 2 Jupiter cannons, ready to blast enemy warships out from the skies. Within the guild, everyone intently awaited the radars to detect incoming enemy ships. Are we sure this thing even works? Macau asked nervously, worried that while they are distracted the enemy will overrun them. Of course it works. It is the latest high-tech sensory equipment, you know. Warren scolded, although he himself was also worried. I must say young Makarov, being here feels nostalgic. Warren stood there smiling with joy as he chatted with Makarov. We are glad to have you here, Warren-sama. Although I wish it was under better circumstances. Makarov sighed. It is fine, in fact. I can feel Maviz's spirit watching over us. Puts me at ease. Warren took a deep relaxed breath as he drank some tea. Unbeknownst to him, Mavis was actually watching. Her spirit sitting on the 2nd floor, watching over them. Smiling warmly over seeing her old friend still in good spirit as always. Itachi's crow clone tapped his foot onto the wooden floorboard, analyzing the sensors. His mind drifting, focused on finding the one he considered the greatest threat, Madara. While his other wood clone was outside somewhere in town, ready to hold of enemy troops along with Elfman, Macbeth, Eric and Kisame. Mira Jane looked at the clone of her husband, a little hesitant. She would prefer to tell the real Itachi in person that she is pregnant. Her sister Lizana notices this and sighs, almost willing to go to Itachi's clone and make him put his attention on Mira Jane, thus forcing her to tell him. Something wrong. Lizana, Kanana, the 2nd barmaid of the guild, and the former snake that belonged to Eric when he was a part of Oracion Cease, approached the youngest Strauss sibling. Yeah, you look a little mad. Kana and Lucy both also joined in on the conversation. Is there something wrong with Mira Jane? Lucy asked, having noticed Lizana's gaze fixated on her older sister. Well, it's complicated. Lizana sounded awkward. How was she supposed to casually bring this up now? Oh my god, she is pregnant. Kana spoke in a monotone voice, to which Lizana flinched, looking startled. And thus, the other 3 girls looked in agape as Lizana's reaction confirmed it. And no way, Lucy uttered in disbelief. Blushing as a result, as it meant Mira and Itachi already had reached that level of intimacy. Does Itachi know? Kanana asked. No, Mirane doesn't want to stress him out more than he already is because of this war. It made sense to them why Mira was hesitant on telling Itachi, as he had been burdened with the role of guild master, on top of there being a war going on. Well, I say it is bullshit. She needs to tell him, it can't wait. Kana spoke out, recalling how she withheld information from Gildarts about her being his daughter for so many years. Hey Mira, however, right then and there the sensory alarm went off. We got 50 incoming enemy ships. Warren began quacking with fear at the number of enemy warships approaching. And not just any warships, 50 giant cruiser battleships. Warren looked like he was about to cry considering their chances. 50. Just one ship that size is enough to fight against a whole guild. Wakaba like Warren looked frightened. So did Macau, but he tried to remain calm as he firmly held onto his son Romeo's shoulders. While Ritas and Vegeta both looked like they were about to have a panic attack. Hey, relax. Laxus' roaring voice boomed across the guild. Remain calm, let them come closer. Laxus sweated a bit, knowing his Thunder Palace were hidden within the clouds. Once they would go off, Biska and Alzak would commence firing Jupiter blasts at the ships. And with Freed's barrier they should be able to hold off enemy fire. Flying within the airspace of Magnolia, were 50 cruiser-sized warships from the Alvarez Imperial Navy. And in the front, on board the biggest ship, was Spriggan member Agiel. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, fairy tale, Judgment Day has come for you. The cruiser warships advanced ever so closer to Magnolia, waiting for the town itself to be within range before opening fire. The ships moved in towards the clouds, although Agiel from the corner of his eye suddenly saw a glimmering flicker. Boom! One of the cruiser ships came into contact with Laxus Thunder Palace, causing a brilliant explosion of flashing lights. Followed by a lightning strike that tore through the ship itself. What the? Agiel remembered this feeling, that lightning bastard that stunned him earlier. However, that explosion was not the last, as by setting off one, they had started a chain reaction of explosions. They hid bombs in the sky, are you kidding? Shoot 'em dead, Agiel ordered as the remaining ships began opening fire onto the town. Although, the bombardment of fire from the ships were prevented from reaching the town, as a dome magical barrier shielded it. And now a magical barrier, man, they really geared up. Agiel smirked with excitement. Within Cardia Cathedral, Freed was giving it his all to supply his magic power into the barrier surrounding Magnolia. Even having Bixlow and Evergreen supplying him with magic power. Freed, give it your best. Evergreen supported. Take as much magic power from me as you need. Bixlow poured his magic power into his friend. Whilst outside, Kisame whistled at the sight of endless bombarding lights blasting into the wall. Hey, Itachi, is that one of the 12? Kisame eyed Agiel, not able to see him but sense his level of magical power. Yes, that would be him. Itachi's wood clone confirmed. Judging by what I can sense, I would say he is stronger than Deidara was. Kisame calmly analyzed. Indeed, maybe even as strong as Kakuzu. Itachi added, to which Kisame hummed, summoning forth his Samahata and hoisting it over his shoulder. Let's get to work. Since you are a clone, try and not slow me down, K. I will try my best. Wood clone Itachi's body lighted up with the fiery aura of the Susanoo. Meanwhile, at the first Jupiter cannon, Alzak fired off his first shot, blasting it straight through one of the bigger cruisers in the sky. Biska, I can't get a shot of the ship with that guy from the 12. How about you? Alzak called his wife through an earpiece. Lacrima. Yeah, I see the bastard. Biska eyed Agiel within her scope, ready to blast that arrogant prick out from the sky. Bang! Biska shot the massive laser beam of pure magical power from her Jupiter cannon, and straight towards Agiel. Agiel, however, smirked at the incoming blast. Not good enough. He held his palm forward, generating a sand barrier before him. The blast scattered when it came into contact with Agiel's sand and blasted into the neighboring ships around Agiel, who cackled like a madman despite half his ships being gone. He took out his own ships. Alzak looked in shock at the cruel treatment Agiel was showing his troops. Wall Ito better have begun his ground assault soon. Once this barrier is down, I can have my fun. Agiel cackled. Back at Cardia, Freed was beginning to breath heavily over having to hold up his barrier against that bombardment of attacks. Impossible. Freed's eyes widened like saucers. What is it? Bixlow looked concerned. Someone put a hole through my barrier, Freed uttered in disbelief. They all flinched the moment they heard the sound of clapping. I almost broke a sweat there. That was quite the impressive barrier. Another of the 12 Wall Ito had breached and entered Magnolia. Mine and Agiel's forces should be wreaking havoc about now. How did you get here so fast? I sensed the breach on the other side of town. Freed was shaken up. The presence of one of the 12 alone was overwhelming. Bixlow and Evergreen quickly acted as guards, ready to face Wall Ito. I have my ways. Out from the sole of his shoes, blasted out a thin stream of fire. He was wearing rocket boots. Wall Ito headbutted Bixlow, knocking him over. Evergreen leaps away and readies to blast Wall. But suddenly Wall Ito's arm stretches to great lengths and grabs onto Evergreen's neck, squeezing at her windpipe, silencing her from casting a spell. And now for you. Wall's head turned 180 degrees to look down on Freed, who looked mortified. Is this guy even human? Freed couldn't risk moving, or else the barrier would fall apart and Agiel's ships would bomb Magnolia. What's this? Wall suddenly halted in his movements in attacking Freed, sensing his number of forces depleting. Out in the streets of the Magnolia, Fairy Tail had made their move. Floating before a sea of unconscious groaning Alvarez Imperial Knights, was Sela of Tartaros. No, it was Mira Jane, Satan's soul, Sela, and standing at her sides were Elfman, Lizana and Laxus. This is an order. All present, sweet dreams. Using Sela's curse power, Mira had knocked out the majority of Wall Ito's henchmen. You're pretty good. A huge bulking muscular man appeared behind Mira, ready to crush her in a bear hug. I am Bakel of Agil's squad. Bakel was threatening with his massive stature not only to squash Mira, but also the child inside her. And then something within Mira's mind clicked. Appearing behind Laxus, was a skinny man with a beard wearing a turban. And I am Kareem, I shall annihilate you and complete my mission. PFFT, get lost. Laxus snorted and with a wave of his arm, blasted Kareem with a wave of lightning, frying the man to a burnt crisp. Wow, Laxus looked amazed as he turned around to see how Mira was doing. N-Nay-chan, Elfman uttered seeing Mira in her usual Satan soul, giving an ice-cold glare at Bakel, as her hand had pierced through his chest. And within her grip, was his still beating heart. Phew, Mira dropped Bakel to the floor. She was speechless, she didn't even remember why she acted like that. All she remembers was feeling the life of her unborn child being threatened. She must have acted on instinct. Back with the Thunder God tribe in Wall Ito. That was surprising. So, you had more of the Emperor's toys around, eh? Interesting. Wall was a bit surprised at the turn of events. Guess they really had underestimated Ishgar. Oh well, once that barrier is down it won't matter. Wall Ito directed his hand towards Freed. The fingers on Wall's had divided in half, revealing some kind of machinery. The palm of his hand opened like a secret passage. And out expanded a small cannon, charging up with blue Ethernano energy. Time to die, Wall smirked. Og, F. Freed, Evergreen barely managed to wheeze out her words, as Wall was tightening his grip on her throat. Oh no you don't. Bixlow having picked himself up, his helmet cracked open revealing his right eye. Surrounding him, was his puppets moving in a circular formation, generating a source of green dark magical energy. Baryon formation, as his puppets charged up the magical green beam, they suddenly halted in midair and fell dead to the floor. Pitiful. Wall scoffed at Bixlow's attempt. Huh, Bixlow froze in confusion, his magic had been cancelled out. He uses light magic. No, but he does. Wall snickered. Behind Bixlow, loomed a dark shadow. The dark magic user of the Thunder God tribe turned around, only to be met with a mighty right hook to the face. Standing tall over him, was what appeared to be a robotic armored warrior with small resemblance to Wall Ito himself. My magic allows me to analyze people's weaknesses, and make countermeasures in my warriors to intercept them, meaning, all of your abilities are useless against me. Ever. Use your eyes. Turn him into stone. Freed quickly shouted, and Evergreen quickly gazed into Wall's eyes. Her eyes flashing yellow, yet for some reason Wall Ito remained unfazed. Fool, that won't work on me. After all, Wall's chest opened up revealing a blue lacrima core containing a high concentration of Ethernano. His attire and body completely altered into a gigantic mechanical warrior, cladded in armor. I am not human, I am a Machias, a special designed cybernetic organic metal lifeform, with the ability to use magic. He's a machine. Freed looked in disbelief that such advanced technology existed in the Western continent. Freed looked desperate. Evergreen was still being choked and would soon die if he didn't act. Bixlow was being beaten down by a mechanical warrior wielding light magic. Forgive me, I need to let down the barrier and fight, Freed uttered. That's right, he. At least you won't die in vain, human. Wall said as some sort of sickening comfort to his opponent. Maximum power perfume, men. Wall Ito was knocked over, his grip on Evergreen released as she fell to the floor gasping for air. Freed looked in awe, as body slamming into Wall Ito was none other than Uchiha of Blue Pegasus. Looking rather big, beefy and muscular thanks to his maximum power perfume. Wall's body rotated on the ground, his lower body moving like a helicopter delivering a series of kicks to Uchiha who skidded backwards while pulling Evergreen to safety. What's this? Another inferior lifeform? Wall analyzed the big beefy Uchiha, who quickly reverted to his short troll-like stature. Men. Uchiha of Blue Pegasus reporting for duty. Men. Uchiha posed, as in between his fingers he wielded a series of perfume bottles. Bixlow. Evergreen got up, looking as her comrade was still getting beaten down by Wall's robot. Fairy machine gun. Evergreen unleashed a torrent of light energy needles, piercing straight through the robot beating on Bixlo. The sudden leak in its body causing it to malfunction. Thanks Ever. Bixlo leapt to Evergreen's side, his babies having returned and floating around him. Just keep that barrier up, Freed-kun. Men, Uchiha posed as he stood with Evergreen and Bixlo staring Wall Ito down. Bixlo-kun, and Evergreen-kun shall aid me, in defeating this bastard. Men. Defeating me. Such bravado, for such a flawed being like yourself. My scanners indicate all your weaknesses, and I must admit, I have never encountered a being with so many flaws as you. Wall looked a little bit stunned, as Uchiha was so flawed he didn't even know where to begin. Men, thank you for the compliment. Uchiha shot the robot a wink, disturbing the Makia ever so slightly. I don't think it was meant as a compliment, Bixlo uttered, as they all sweat dropped at Uchiha's carefree attitude. Uchiha is in a class of his own, Evergreen commented. For a machine to be talking off flaws, you certainly ignore your own. Uchiha stuck 2 of his perfume bottles up his nose, inhaling them. Thunder perfume. Men, lightning generated around the little troll of a man. Gentleman thunder strike. Uchiha pointed his finger towards Wall Ito, blasting a lightning bolt into the Makia. Yet within the encased electricity, surging through his body. Wall Ito merely laughed at the attempt. Did you honestly think I would have earned the rank of Spriggan with such a weakness? Indeed, normal machinery are weak to lightning attacks. Although I am different, for I have found a way to cancel out that weakness in me. My body is able to convert lightning into pure energy to fuel my body. What? Freed gasped in horror. Then even Laxus would prove to be helpless before him. Kakaka. There is no escape. You all will perish. Wall Ito enjoyed seeing the look of despair on their faces. Redirecting the electricity from Uchiha's attack, right back at Bixlo, Evergreen and Uchiha. AAARRRRGGGHHH. The trio cried out in agony, as they were blown back. I can't let this continue, forgive me. Freed lowered his enchantment barrier. Outside, Agil cackled seeing the barrier beginning to shrink. Seems ol' Wall did his job. Now shot them all dead. Agil ordered, and the remaining warships surrounding Magnolia commenced opening heavy fire. However, raising before the town was a gigantic wall of water, absorbing the blaster fire from the cruiser warships. Take it easy, kids. Don't worry about the town, me and Itachi got it covered. Standing on top of the raising tsunami wave, was the shark man Kisame. Speaking through the telepathy link, everyone in town especially Freed could rest a bit easy. Water style. Super water shark bomb. Holding his hands out in the shape of an open jaw, the tsunami turned into a massive water shark. Its massive jaws opened to devour its prey, swallowing up warships of the Alvarez Imperial Navy. And crushing the ships within its massive fangs, and from the water pressure generated from within it. What the hell? Agil gaped in disbelief, and to further surprise leaping over the massive water shark, was the bright burning perfect Susanoo from Itachi's clone. The massive blade of the Susanoo, slicing right through the cruiser warships like butter. Agil looked around him, seeing his ships dropping like flies and hearing the screams of his soldiers as they abandoned the ships. Makarov's little soldier, finally I get my rematch. Agil glared at the clone of Itachi, not realizing it wasn't the real one. From the corner of his eye, Agil could see the Jupiter cannons charging up their blasts. Can't have that, now can we? In order to save his remaining ships, Agil raised his hands. Every grain corn of sand in Magnolia, gathered up into the sky. The mighty force of the wind blowing violently in every direction. All the sand gathered into a massive sandstorm. Arg, my eyes. Alzak closed his eyes using his poncho, his sights blinded, same with Biska. As all of Magnolia was now covered by one massive sandstorm. Agil cackled like a madman. Turn to dust. I will turn every single one of you into a mummy. I will dry you all up into mere skin and bone. There was no shelter to seek cover. The sandstorm had even reached inside every building and apartment in Magnolia, even the fairy tale Guildhall. Agil's smirk wavered, as he suddenly felt a drop of water fall onto his shoulder. Coming crashing down onto his ship, was a massive wave of pure water. The amount of water almost caused the ship to be knocked out of the sky. Water rained down over Magnolia, the moisture helping people stay hydrated enough to not suffer so much from Agil's sandstorm. Agil turned his head to the side, glaring at the culprit who had boarded his ship. Hey, don't you worry Itachi. I will take care of this sand punk. Kisame stood tall, water flowing around him moistening up his already semi-dried skin. "Oh, and you are?" Ajil looked intrigued as he felt the sheer power emitting from Kisame. "Kisame Hoshigaki, or to give you a better understanding, EKH. Kisame introduced himself, black demonic markings spreading across his right torso. And coming out from his chest, was the massive Samahata blade. One of His Majesty's demons, eh? Interesting. Ajil smirked as he generated waves of sand around him to counter Kisame's water. "Hurry, get inside," Laxus ordered, standing by the doors of the guildhall. Mira Jane, Elfman, Kana, Lucy, Lizana, Eric, Macbeth all quickly rushing in. Laxus, seeing the incoming Susanoo, knew he couldn't wait anymore and closed the door to the guild. Itachi's clone, being the only source of protection with his Susanoo, surrounded the guildhall with his spectral warrior, giving shelter to everyone in town and keeping the sandstorm out. "What do we do? We still have people out there." Laxus looked to Itachi's wood clone, who seemed nearly out of energy as he was panting. "He is running low, the Susanoo consumes a lot of chakra." Itachi's crow clone interjected. "As for the others, well, let's hope Kisame can manage to defeat Ajil before they die." Itachi knew it wasn't pleasant, but they had no other option than to put their faith in Kisame. Laxus looked distraught, knowing that amongst the people who didn't make it to the guild in time, was Freed and the rest of his group. With Uchiha and the Thunder God tribe as they faced off against Wall Ito, could barely see the robot through this sandstorm. "That blasted Ajil, the sand is entering my system, it will slow down my movements," Wall Ito grumbled in annoyance over his companion. "Now is our chance," Freed declared, his magic flaring around him. Dark creature, Shadow, using his magic on himself, to create an armor of darkness around him. The armor helped with his vision in seeing Wall through the sandstorm, as it shielded Freed's eyes. "Everyone, attack at full force, 12 o'clock. Freed guided his friends to where to strike, and they complied. Baryon formation, Fairy Bomb, Gremlin, Maximum Power Perfume. Evergreen surrounded Wall Ito with dust magical particles, and ignited them into a series of explosions, making tears in his armor. "Arg, vision blocked, can't calculate," Wall growled, cursing Ajil for putting him at a disadvantage. He was then blasted by the green beam from Bixlow's Baryon formation, the beam cracking his lacrima core at the center of his chest. And no. Now, Uchiha. Freed rushed Wall along with Uchiha. Men. Both of them raised their fists, and smashed right through Wall Ito's cybernetic body, ripping him essentially in half. We did it. Freed looked in disbelief. One of the 12 was taken out, and so easily. It was almost too good to be true. "Freed, hurry up and recreate your barrier. We need to keep this sandstorm out of Magnolia," Bixlow called out, and Freed quickly sprang into action, readying himself to recreate his barrier around the town. However, things were not over. Error. Unit 1 has experienced critical damage. A robotic voice rang like an alarm from the remains of Wall Ito. "He's still alive?" Freed questioned in shock. "Not for long." Evergreen readied to blast the remains of the robot. Commence self-destruct sequence. This quickly raised the alarm in all of them. 3, 2, 1. The countdown was even short. Freed quickly jumped at his friends, pushing them down. Although it wasn't enough, Wall Ito's remains started to glow in a menacing golden light. Men. Uchiha, suddenly in his bulky muscular form, grabbed onto Freed, Bixlow and Evergreen, and leapt to the furthest end of the church, shielding them using his massive bulky body. "Even if it were only for a short time. You all were a part of my beloved Blue Pegasus Guild. You are a part of my family. And as such, I refuse to let harm befall onto you." Uchiha, Freed, Evergreen and Bixlow all looked in awe. "I know you all in Fairy Tail share these ideals." Uchiha smiled upon them as he held them close, ready to take the full force of the blast if it meant protecting them. "Uchiha," they all cried out, although their voices were drowned out by the sound of the explosion. All the windows within Cardia Cathedral shattered, fiery smoke blasting out from the shattered windows and the now broken down door. Even in the sandstorm, the explosion shined like a beacon of light. The smoke cleared within the cathedral. The insides of the church were burnt. A giant black spot where Wall Ito's body used to be had permanently burned itself into the cathedral. The ceiling having collapsed itself, and the pillars holding up this massive structure barely holding on. And through the sandstorm, the forms of Uchiha, Freed, Bixlow and Evergreen laying under a pile of rubble from the collapsed ceiling came to view. Bixlow, Evergreen and Freed groaned as they laid there alive, although unconscious. As for Uchiha, he still had one eye open, taking in the sound of their groans with much joy, as he had saved their lives. Thank goodness, men, Uchiha himself passed out, his back having suffered burns from the explosion, and bruises from the collapsed rubble. Smoke emitted from his body as he shrank into his short normal self. Meanwhile, far away from Magnolia onboard an Alvarez cruiser-sized warship flying in the sky. A man laid face first onto the floorboard, letting out a sickening cackling laughter. Ah, they sounded so hopeful. Ahahaha. This young man had messy wavy dark brown hair. His expression looked rather furrowed and sported with a devilish grin on his face, exposing his rather sharp pointy teeth. Around his jawline are several silver circles, and in his ears, what appears to be screw-studded in them. Sir, what is our next move? An Alvarez knight nervously asked this man. Nothing for now. Agil ruined the chances of my unit to kill those small fries. But it seems he's got things covered with his sandstorm. The man picked himself up from the floor, and looked at the sandstorm-covered city of Magnolia in the distance. This young man was dressed in orange coveralls with a harness buckled around his chest in the form of a tunic. He had a black collar, and wore very long black gloves that reached up to his shoulders where he had the Alvarez Empire insignia. And to complete his outfit he wore long black rubber boots. Hold our ships on standby for now. Alright, you heard Walito-sama. Hold the ships on standby. The knight ordered the crew. Let's just see what this guild of His Majesty's lover is capable of. The real body of Walito smirked devilishly. Meanwhile, within Magnolia, Kisame stood face to face with Agil, the dessert king of the Spriggan 12. Kisame wielded the Samahata in his right hand, and coming out from his left was the massive executioner's blade. Agil smirked and welcomed the charging Kisame head-on, as the shark man swung the executioner's blade in an attempt to cut him down. Kisame was caught off guard, as the executioner's blade turned into sand and vanished before his very eyes. Anything my body touches turns into sand, nice try though. Agil mocked him, and blasted Kisame away with a wave of sand. The weight of the sand gathering around Kisame's body, strong enough to crush bones underneath it. Water style. Water dragon. Kisame unleashed a massive water dragon, countering Agil's sand wave. The sand taking in the moistening from the water dragon, causing it to crumble. And water seems to be your weakness, lucky me. Kisame showed his shark fangs as he smirked at Agil. In your dreams, Agil raised his arms, generating the sand around him into creating a massive sand drill. The sand drill span at an intense speed, giving it so much force that it probably could tear through solid steel. I will dry up your water faster than you can moisten my sand. There is no ocean nearby, I am within my own element unlike you. And your blades cannot touch me, as any object I touch turns to sand. I have the advantage, Agil boasted. I wouldn't be so certain of that if I were you. Kisame smirked. As to replace his executioner's blade, he summoned forth a different sword. A massive bulky sword, bandaged up like the Samahata. The blade was double-handed. Hiramakare, better known as the twin sword. PFFT, like I said, it won't do you any good. Your sword will just turn to sand like the last one. Agil stood confidently with his arms crossed, and with a mere raise of his finger, his sand drill was sent flying at Kisame. Kisame, however, leapt right in, aiming for Agil. Kisame swiftly swung the Samahata, cutting the sand drill in half, and rushed through the opening it made. Hilting his Samahata onto his back, and grabbing onto both handles of the twin sword, Agil shrugged, as it didn't matter to him what Kisame did. However, suddenly the blade of the sword started to glow, waves of energy moving like water. Then before Agil even had time to react, the blue waves of energy morphed into a gigantic hammer head. Looking baffled, Kisame took his opportunity with Agil distracted and slammed the hammer head into Agil. Agil was smacked in his jaw, blood pouring out from his lips as he was sent flying. What? Agil halted himself midair, creating a giant sand hand to catch him and lower him back onto the ship. Agil slowly reached his hand up to his lip, wiping his finger over the blood. Suddenly the air around Agil had changed, he looked more serious. Holding his arms out, flexing his muscles to the point where the veins on his arms were visible. Fine, let's see how well you do against this. Agil leapt into the air, glaring bellow at Kisame. Ramal Saif. Agil enveloped himself with the sand, sending a storm of sand-shaped blades raining down around Kisame. The barrage of blades raining down was like standing under a rainstorm. Kisame steadied himself and generated the energy within the twin sword. However, before he could even swing the blade, a sand blade sliced his right wrist. Kisame grunted seeing his wrist cut open, blood gushing out as the cut was so deep Kisame's hand was halfway cut off. A sand blade then jabbed itself into his shoulder, followed by another slice in his lower left calf. Kisame dropped the twin sword and at the speed of lightning formed the hand seals. Water style. Water prison jutsu. Kisame enveloped himself within his own water prison. He never thought he would need to use it on himself like this. But with Agile's sand blades it was the perfect defense, as they crumbled from hitting the water dome around him. Now, Kisame formed another set of hand seals, and aimed his palm at Agile. Water style. Water shark bomb. Kisame unleashed a part of his water prison, turning it into a shark and sending it flying at Agile. Agile frowned and quickly reacted, generating a wall of sand before him to catch the blast of the water shark. Kisame grunted as hands of sand formed beneath him in his water prison, hoisting him up. It was the hands of a gigantic sand golem created by Agile. The golem, despite its hands getting moistened from the water, smacked its hands together to squash Kisame. Like I said, faster than you can moisten my sand. Agile chuckled, although his ever-confident smile fading as he suddenly sensed something moving behind him. Kisame stood over Agile, with the Samahata cloaked in water raised over his head. Agile, however, snickered as Kisame's body suddenly came to a halt. I can't move. Kisame looked in confusion, his arms refusing to budge. Agile calmly stepped a few steps away from Kisame, before turning around to face him. A smirk plastered onto his face. You know the thing about sand, it gets everywhere. Agile snickered, and Kisame suddenly began screaming in pain and agony. Right now, my sand is destroying your body from within. You really shouldn't take wounds like that too casually. Kisame flinched as he realized the rain of sand blades that cut into his body earlier. Agile's sand had entered his body and bloodstream, and was starting to destroy his cells from within. Aarrrrrggghhhhhhhhh. Kisame roared in pain, veins bulging around his forehead. It's my victory, Agile declared confidently. You, and Fairy Tail, will perish. Within the sheltered guildhall, Itachi's clone had run out of chakra, and as a result, begun withering away into mere flakes of wood. His perfect Susanoo wavering and losing its armor. Itachi, hang on. Makarov held onto the withering clone of Itachi. Forgive me, I cannot hold on any longer. The clone smiled as his Sharingan even faded away, and the Susanoo with it. And thus, the sandstorm made its way back into the guildhall. What are we going to do? I can't see a damn thing in this storm. Laxus cursed. He would join the battle to fight Agile. If only he could see and locate him. Don't fret, have faith in Kisame, Itachi's clone uttered before it completely vanished. Kisame laid there in pain, his mind frantically trying to figure a way out of this. Itachi had trusted him to protect his new home. Itachi had showed him the true meaning of being a human. He could at least return the favor by protecting what Itachi loved. I'm not done yet. Kisame clenched his fists, digging his nails into his palms drawing blood. I'm not dead yet, you bastard. Kisame snickered. Agile looked confused at this sudden development, when suddenly he felt a chill overcome him. Darkness was oozing out from Kisame, demonic markings spreading across his wide back. His wounds healing. He used his demonic darkness to destroy my sand in his body. Agile looked shocked as he lost control of the sand within Kisame's body. Kisame looked up to him, his fangs stained with blood as he maliciously smirked at Agile. The Samahata on his back began merging with his body, the darkness still spreading across Kisame's body. And the shark man pounced on Agile, a sphere of darkness forming in Kisame's jaw. In truth, Kisame was living up to his title as a tailless tailed beast, as the sphere looked like a biju bomb. Like a tailed beast, Kisame spat out the sphere of darkness. Agile reacted by creating a shield of sand, and blocked the blast of darkness. The sheer power of the blast blowing off a chunk of the ship behind Agile. Agile flinched, seeing the very skin on his right hand from his wrist and down had been burnt off. Can you turn demonic darkness into sand? Kisame looked more like a shark now, having merged with his Samahata. Black demonic marks spread across his back, covering his arms into demonic black claws as Kisame had entered his ethereous form. Didn't think so. Kisame snickered at seeing Agile's expression, and Kisame sliced Agile's chest using his demonic claws. What the? Ajil noticed tags of paper attached to his scratched chest, noticing Kisami's arm fin was covered in paper bombs. The tags exploded on Ajil's chest, leaving a massive burning cloud of black smoke. As a part of my curse, I can assimilate any of the 7 swords of the mist from my body. Like the paper bombs of the Shibuki blade. Nice, I will keep that in mind. Sand gathered behind Kisame, forming themselves into Ajil. Here is a tip from me. I can assimilate my body into sand. Wielding a sand sword, Ajil sliced Kisame across the back, cutting off his back fin. Kisame leapt away, dragging his claws across the wooden floor of the ship. From a water pool left from his earlier attack, Kisame summoned forth 4 live sharks, sending them sliding towards Ajil in a blast of water. Ajil summoned forth a sand axe, and sliced at the first shark, cutting off its head in one strike. Ajil followed by nailing the other 3 sharks with sand drill from above, piercing straight through their backs. All in the span of 20 seconds. Kisame charged forward, his fist raised. Ajil countered his strike with the use of his forearm. Ajil quickly acted and elbowed Kisame in the chin. Although the shark man couldn't help but wonder, why didn't he assimilate himself into sand again? Despite having blocked Kisami's punch, Kisami's punches with demonic power still carried a lot of weight. Too much for a human to take, as evident by the purple bruise on Ajil's forearm signifying a broken bone. So why did Ajil take that so-called unnecessary damage? Kisame charged in again, his demonic claw ready to swat Ajil like a fly upside the head. But before Kisame could blink, Ajil had assimilated himself into sand once more. Charging like a raging storm at Kisame. Kisame wheezed, his throat feeling very dry all of a sudden. His skin looking drier, and his muscle mass reduced. Crap, I need to think of something fast, Kisame grunted, his body losing liquid as Ajil's sand dried it up. Wait a minute, he assimilated himself into sand. He is the sand. Kisame formed a quick set of hand seals, inhaling his breath, gathering what water he had left in his body. Water style. Super explosive water shockwave. Kisame spewed out a fountain of water. Ajil, realizing the danger, hesitantly solidified himself back into his human form. Crap, that was close. Just how strong is his water affinity? Ajil looked pissed, having nearly died there. Hey, even though you can assimilate into sand to avoid physical attacks, if you come into contact with water, it will moisten your body and crumble it. You would never be able to gather yourself back into your human body. And judging by your reaction, you can only assimilate yourself into the sand for so long. Before you die, you are still human after all. Kisame had gathered, figuring out Ajil's weakness. And it infuriated Ajil to no end. So what? Ajil, enraged, charged right at Kisame, making a sand tsunami to hoist himself up into the air. I will tear you to pieces. His arms behind his back, Ajil generated spirals of sand into both of his palms. Sand Dragon Whirlwind. Clashing his hands together, Ajil unleashed a massive whirlwind of sand. The sheer size of it was like a dragon, and it even resembled one. And with the appearance, the sheer force and power of a dragon that could bury an entire small country. Kisame quickly had to counter it, or Magnolia, and even beyond Magnolia, possibly all the way over to Harjan, would be buried underneath the sand. Water style. Crap, I won't make it in time. Kisame was on full alarm as the sand whirlwind dragon clashed into him. Kisame could only gasp, as sand was filling his very body, his lungs. There was no escape. I can't let it end here. Kisami's mind was racing, trying to think of ideas. The sand dragon dragged Kisame with it, down to Magnolia. And towards the lake behind the fairy tale Guildhall. And something else Kisame saw looming in the clouds beneath. I need to get the sand out from my lungs. It's a gamble, but Kisame raised his demonic claw, making it take the shape of a blade of darkness. Whilst he shielded his mouth and nose with a mask of darkness to prevent more sand from flowing into his body. What is he doing? Ajil raised a brow, thinking anyone would see the pointless struggle of this battle by now and accept death. Kisame then did the unthinkable. He stabbed his blade of darkness into his own gut, and dragged it down. He literally gutted himself. Now, Kisame slammed his palms together, manipulating the current of the lake in Magnolia, sending a wave of water into his open stomach before his darkness closed his gut up again. Kisame heard his heartbeat, getting weaker and weaker. He couldn't breathe, he couldn't move, and his heart finally stopped. Kisame had died. Game over. Ajil laughed from above as Kisame with the sand dragon was about to clash with Magnolia. The mask of darkness cleared away from Kisami's face, and leaking out from his lips were water. The remaining chakra in his body, moving the current of water around within his body. And with the water, the sand in his body, and at intense speed, the water surged up his throat, and Kisami's gulped up water mixed with a great chunk of sand. Then, his body landed onto a round object. It was a lightning lacrima piece from the Thunder Palace that hadn't collided with any ships from Agile's fleet. The lightning lacrima exploded, sending a surge of electricity through Kisami's body. And a wave of electricity up the sand dragon, and into Agile. Aagggghahahahahahahahahah. Agile cried out as the lightning from the Thunder Palace stunned him. The silence was broken by the sound of a heartbeat that grew steadier and steadier by the second. Kisame suddenly let out a loud gasp, coughing up some sand stuck in his mouth. The lightning lacrima had jump-started his heart. Impossible, Agile grunted, barely able to move due to being stunned by the lightning lacrima. I just managed to see the lightning lacrima hidden in the clouds, just as I was about to despair. I took a gamble, to cleanse out the sand in my body, even if it would kill me. Kisame revealed. You will not be so lucky next time. Agile, having shaken off the stun from the lightning, continued with his sand dragon whirlwind. Water style. Demonic shark. Kisame managed to use his time, to counter Agile's attack with his strongest attack. A shark made out of dark black water, 10 times the size of his super water shark bomb. The size of it, was so large it swallowed up the sand whirlwind dragon. Agile gasped in terror, seeing Kisame riding on the top of the massive shark's head towards him. The demonic shark chomped its jaws onto the remains of Agile's ship, dragging it away from Magnolia. Along with the rest of what remained of Agile's fleet, which were only 7 ships. As the demonic shark flew off away from Magnolia, the sandstorm over Magnolia vanished as a result. Stepping out from the fairy tale guildhall, was Laxus. He looked around, seeing the sandstorm was gone, and the skies were clear of any ships. He did it, Laxus uttered. With Kisami's success of saving Magnolia, Laxus quickly rushed towards Cardia Cathedral to check on Freed, Evergreen and Bixlow. Rushing right past the remaining Alvarez Knights of Agile, while Ito's Knights in Magnolia. Whilst those in the guild rushed back out to continue the battle. Clashing like a lightning bolt, through the collapsed ceiling of the church. Laxus landed in the middle of the church. Freed, Ever, Bixlow, are you alive? Laxus quickly noticed Freed, Bixlow, Evergreen and Uchiha buried under rubble with some sand. Their skins a bit dry. Guys, Laxus leaned in, listening for a heartbeat in all of them. With his Dragon Slayer hearing, he could clearly hear all their heartbeats. They were alive. You guys, you have made me proud, Laxus smiled upon his unconscious friends. The demonic shark dragged Agile's cruiser ship fleet and collided into an open landscape just outside of the port town of Harjan. Agile crawled out from the broken remains of his ship, his remaining ships having clashed so it looked like he was surrounded by an arena. Why, you bastard, Agile was winded, that last attack had knocked the wind out of him. He glared up at Kisame, who stood before him, out of his ethereous form. And back to normal with a few demonic marks on the right side of his torso. This is bad, Kisame panted, seeing the knights on board those ships he dragged with him climbing out from the rubble. That last attack consumed a great chunk of my chakra, I barely have anything left to spare. Sand World. In a quick last-ditch effort, Agile recreated his sandstorm. Although the magnitude of it wasn't nearly as great as before. Showing how much magic power Agile himself had used up. The sandstorm covered their entire battleground, and nearly reached Harjan as well. Kisame moved quickly within Agile's sandstorm, generating water from his already dry skin, and as well as the sand of Agile. This guy, physical attacks won't work as he can just turn his body into sand. Although he has a time limit before he needs to return to human form. And a 30-second window before he can assimilate himself again by the looks of it. Kisame thought back to earlier in their fight, where right after Agile had assimilated himself into sand and returned back to normal, he was forced to block a strike from Kisame with his forearm. I need to be fast. Using a heavy sword like Samahata won't do the trick. Dry up, you old shark. Your time has passed, old man. Time to turn to ashes like the rest of the ancient relics of the old days. Agile cackled as he generated the sand around him, into 100 gigantic sand fists smashing after Kisame. Agile wanted to win, and kill Kisame. Proving his worth to his emperor. Proving himself to be strong. Kisame threw the Samahata at Ajil, cloaking the blade in water to prevent Ajil from turning it into sand. Ajil quickly converted himself into the sand, moving away from the blade, before quickly reforming himself. Relic, huh? Well, this relic got one more card up his sleeve. Out from the flesh of Kisame's wrists, stuck out twin blades. The Kiba blades, the lightning fang swords of the mist. Lightning generated around Kisame, as well as a torrent of water gathering around his lower body. And with that, want to fight to our heart's content. Mighty Desert King, Kisame smirked at the frowning Ajil, moving swiftly amidst the storm of sand fists. You insignificant fish, Ajil spat as he increased the amount of sand fists from 100 to 1,000, and increased the speed of their ferocious bombardment of attacks. Yet Kisame remained unfazed. The lightning, plus the speed of the water, Kisame was bouncing around like a bolt of lightning, leaving his water to moisten the air and the sandstorm around him, and weakening Ajil's attacks whilst closing in on him. With his speed, Kisame narrowly avoided countless strikes from Ajil's sand fists, spraying them with water, making them crumble as they flew past him. Ajil was blinded by the desire to kill Kisame, that he hadn't noticed the torrent of thousands of sand fists he had created had begun to crumble from the water. Huh, Ajil flinched as what was wet sand dripped onto his shoulder from one of said sand fists. What? Ajil quickly had to return his focus onto Kisame, who was inching closer. Acting quickly, Ajil shot a wave of sand needles, yet Kisame pushed through. Despite the sand piercing into his body, and despite Ajil manipulating the sand to harm every cell in the shark man's body, Kisame smirked, as his demonic power began healing the torn and broken cells Ajil just destroyed, and pushed on further. Shit, I won't be able to convert my body into sand in time. Finally, Ajil looked alarmed, seeing the sharky toothy grinning Kisame right up in his face. Fuck you, Ajil roared and created a sand battle axe, aiming to behead Kisame. Too slow, Kisame smirked as he switched grip on the Kiba sword in his right hand, flinging his arm upward. And in a swift motion, slicing Ajil's right arm clean off from his elbow and down. The water merged with lightning into the blade, severed swiftly through his flesh and bone, and moistened the sand that surrounded his body like an armor. Ajil snarled, and created a second axe in his left hand. Kisame tilted his body to the side to avoid the slash of Ajil's axe, whilst also in a swift motion slicing off his left forearm. No, this is not how it ends. Ajil gathers his magic and creates a giant sand golem. The sheer size of the beast towered over Kisame like a giant from the Sun Village. Ajil also intensified the amount of sand in this miniature sandstorm, making the air drier. It became clear that Ajil did not care for the safety of his crew. As the sandstorm had already mummified the majority of his men, the golem, in a last desperate ditch attempt, tried to catch Kisame and squash him. Get buried, you piece of shit! Ajil gave a war cry. Kisame wasn't fast enough, as the sand golem gripped onto Kisame's raised left arm. Using its massive strength to crush every bone in Kisame's arm, Kisame quickly acted and released the Kiba sword in his left hand, catching the hilt of the falling sword into his mouth. And in a swift motion, using the second Kiba sword in his right hand, Kisame cut his own left arm off from his shoulder and down. Kisame flung his body forward, stretching his neck as far as he could, and swung his body down, slicing the Kiba sword that he held in his mouth across Ajil's torso, and quickly acted using the second Kiba sword in his right hand to slice Ajil across his torso again. Blood erupted from Ajil, as Kisame had sliced the Kiba swords in an X formation across his entire torso. Ajil's eyes widened like saucers. He looked angry that he had been taken down like this. Yet he also looked with a hint of disbelief, like this was some kind of nightmare. Ajil's body trembled, as he stepped backwards a few steps. He glared down at Kisame, his eyes twitching as his gaze seethed with hatred and anger. Why you? Kisame spat out the Kiba blade in his mouth, as he glared back at Ajil. You? Ajil's eyes rolled into the back of his head, as the flesh of his torso was torn open and his body split into 4 pieces. Fucking piece of shit, Ajil uttered his last dying breath, his lower body remaining standing for a few seconds, blood erupting from it like a fountain. Then with a mere breeze from the wind his lower half was knocked over. The sandstorm vanished, and the sand golem crumbled as its master had perished. Kisame took in a deep breath, finally able to breathe without getting sand into his mouth. Looking towards his severed left arm, darkness erupted from his bloody stomp, and reconnected with his severed arm. slowly but surely reattaching itself to Kisami's body. Hey, looks like first blood goes to us. Kisame fell onto his ass, chuckling as he let his demonic powers heal his broken body. Out in the southern isles of Ishgar, Zirf flinched as he sensed the death of Agil. The Emperor frowned as his anger built up over the failure of one of his pawns. Invul, Agil is dead, make contact with Nineheart this instant. As you wish, my lord. Do you want Nineheart to use his magic to revive Agil? Invul couldn't help but ask. No, any who fail me doesn't deserve a second chance at life. Zirf harshly declared, besides what would be the point? Agil had proven himself weaker than the enemy. Zirf had no use for him anymore. Unbeknownst to them, despite the fall of their general, Agil's men still raged on within Magnolia. Explosions erupting around the town at an alarming speed. And in the chaos, the blonde celestial wizard rushed through a battalion of soldiers. Using her magical energy whip to electrocute and knocking out the Alvarez knight. We got you now. 3 knights rushed Lucy from behind, the celestial wizard having no time to react could only gasp. What followed was the sound of lightning and the groans of the knights, as they were hit by magic cards containing lightning magic. What's the rush, Lu? Kana came to Lucy's aid, standing back to back with the celestial mage. Before the battle, I put a barrier around my apartment. The alarm just went off, and someone entered it. And I know it's not Natsu or Happy like usual. Entering her Taurus dress, Lucy delivered an uppercut punch into a knight's chest, shattering the armor plate protecting him to shreds with her amazing strength. What is it in your apartment that is so interesting anyway? Kana kicked a knight back, and threw a card stabbing into his armor chest plate, lighting him on fire with the fire magic within it. I don't know, but I'm not about to let it become an enemy base within town. Plus, I have some stuff there, Lucy's mind going to a certain novel she was working on, as well as the broken key of her former spirit. They managed to push through, the door leading into the building broken down. And within were 3 dead bodies of wizards bearing the fairy tale guild mark. Lucy and Kana sweated in terror at the sight, it looked like their chests had exploded from within. Blood having splattered onto the wallpaper. With a short second to grieve those that had died, Lucy and Kana rushed up to the 2nd floor into Lucy's apartment. This feeling, I know it. Lucy gasped as they ran into her apartment, and the moment she set foot in there. The same level of pressure she felt on Caracal Island resurfaced, Kana also freezing stiff in terror. Standing in Lucy's apartment, was one of the 12, Brandish. Her attention focused on something on Lucy's desk where she sits to write her novels. I knew there was something about you, Brandish uttered, as the room began shaking, and the object on the desk began wobbling as a result. The object being the broken key of Aquarius. I see, so, the witch is dead, huh? Brandish's eyes looked emotionless as she stared at the broken key. Why did you come here? Lucy gathered up the courage to ask. Why, oh, revenge I suppose, is the best way to describe it. Brandish sighed, looking rather bored. Revenge? I don't even know you. Lucy pointed out, to which a smirk appeared on Brandish's face. True, you don't know me, but I know you, Lucy Heartfilia. Daughter of Layla Heartfilia. Brandish looked over to them from the corner of her eye. The lights in the room began to flicker as the circuits went highwire from all this shaking. That is all I need, to kill you. Brandish's gaze narrowed at them, her killing intent filling the air. Lucy quickly acted, swinging her whip and grabbing a hold of the notes from her novel. Run, was all Lucy could say to Kana, before she sprinted out of the room. Kana wasted no time and followed. As they ran back down the stairs, the walls were closing in, the stairway getting smaller, the ceiling closing in on them. The two could barely fit through the door, Kana even getting her butt stuck for a second before she managed to wiggle free. The two fell on their asses, as Lucy's apartment building shrank to the size of a doll house. And standing on top of it, was Brandish looking down on them. With a stomp of her boot, the shrunken building was shattered in an instant. Judging by what I sensed earlier, it would seem one of your people managed to kill Agil. Kana and Lucy would look happy, although they couldn't help but look wary that Brandish didn't seem too bothered by it. You are awfully calm, despite losing one of your own with the same level of power as yourself. Kana pointed out, readying herself for battle. Same level, don't insult me. Brandish shrugged as she glared at the 2 fairy tale wizards. Agil was easily the 2nd weakest amongst the 12. I'm much stronger than him. Brandish unleashed her power. The level of intensity and pressure made it harder for Lucy and Kana to breathe. Lucy also flinched as she noticed, in Brandish's hand was the broken key of Aquarius. Meanwhile, at the port of Harjan, the battle was well underway. A battalion of cruiser warships filled with over 10,000 Alvarez soldiers. The defense squad led by Kagura couldn't do much but hide in the nearby shops. As the cruises unleashed bombardment after bombardment of blaster fire, many had already been killed in this endless bombardment. The entire port was on fire, and their own warships had been destroyed even before they could use it. Kagura didn't understand. It was like in one moment the skies were clear, and in a split second it had been filled with warships of the enemy. Several of the Rune Knights stationed in Harjan had tried to reach their warships docked at the ports to intercept. Although were all blown away along with their ships. Were the enemy ships cloaked? Did they have some kind of teleportation magic going on? Kagura-chan, were outnumbered. Miliana called out to her as the shore had quickly been overrun with Knight of the Empire. Miliana had taken shelter along with Beth, Risley and Arania, trying to hold of the enemy to the best of their abilities. A wave of knights was suddenly blown away by a wind blast, and burnt alive by black fire. Coming jumping in was Kakuzu, stretching his limbs and wrapping his tentacles onto multiple enemies, throwing them around like ragdolls. Flame gods, bellow. Using the power of Zankro's heart, Kakuzu annihilated another wave of knights. Now, Kakuzu called out, and in jumped Itachi's wood clone, leaping straight into the enemy forces. Kagura looked baffled as she saw Itachi's clone knock away several of the Alvarez soldiers. Sky Dragon. Roar. Quickly joining in was little Wendy, along with her friend Sharia from Lamia Scale, using their Slayer powers to blow away another wave of enemies. Even Carla using her human form and martial arts skills to fight the knights. Her clairvoyance helping in predicting the enemy's movements. The ground beneath some Alvarez knight moved, and suddenly twisted itself enwrapping the Empire's forces. And another smaller group were knocked down as a red flash moved in between them, knocking them over. Richard and Sawyer, the two former Oracion Cease members formerly known as Hotai and Racer. Man, these guys are slow, Sawyer smirked, as he moved quickly to avoid blaster fire from the warships in the sky. Although those warships are a problem, Richard manipulated the ground to create a defensive wall around himself and the others. Let's go, Toby. Yuka and Toby of Lamia Scale charged in. Yuka utilizing his wave magic to cancel out incoming attacks from the enemy. And then Toby used his nails to paralyze them. Ready, my beloved. Sherry stood next to her husband Ren of Blue Pegasus. Sherry creating a marionette doll out of some broken rubble to knock away a few knights, while Ren trapped some within a magical bubble, sucking away at their oxygen, making them pass out due to lack of air. Always babe. Ren blushed a bit at calling Sherry for babe. I can't despair now. We still have a fighting chance. Kagura picked herself up, and launched herself into battle. Everyone, charge at the ground troops. I will deal with the airships. Kagura's bold declaration was met with a few looks of speculation, but her fellow mermaids looked with confidence. Don't underestimate our girl Kagura, Risley declared, and charged into a battalion of knights, knocking them over. Urania trapped some within her web, while Beth grew gigantic carrots from the ground and fired them like missiles into a crowd of knights. Miliana, look out. The Alvarez knights had managed to spread too far into town, and were now flanking them from behind. Miliana was about to actually be cut down by a magical sword. Although, suddenly magic circles appeared on the bodies of the knights, all placed at random but at some vital spot on their bodies. Miliana yelped in shock, when suddenly magical bullets blasted into those magic circles on the knights' bodies. Cubes flew around Miliana, and gathered into a familiar figure wearing a fedora and looking rather blocky. Dandy, the man tipped his hat, and shot more of the knights, all headshots. Another wave of knights came at them, although all vanished and in their place appeared magical cards instead. Yo, Miliana, been a while. Miliana looked in awe as before her were some of her oldest friends. We heard the distress call from Fairy Tail. We thought we owed it to Nay-san to help. These chumps are about to learn. Wally looking the same as ever, blocky and dressed like a gangster. Dandy, and Sho, wearing an open Hawaiian shirt, and sunglasses. Sho, Wally, Miliana was brought to tears of joy over seeing her old friends again. How are we going to deal with those ships though? Sho looked to the sky, as the ships were in the middle of recharging their blasters. I can't trap something that massive with my magic. Don't worry, my friend Kagura's got a plan. NYA, let's get pumped. Miliana looked excited, seeing Kagura standing alone at the docks focusing her archenemy and magical power. Kagura took in deep breaths, her eyes closed, as she went into battle stance and gracefully raised her arms with her archenemy blade unsheathed above her head. The wind strongly gathering towards her, focused around her blade. Standing on the top deck of the leading warship of this fleet, was Demaria of the 12. Looking rather bored as she yawned at the pitiful struggle. With her magic it was easy to ambush the awaiting forces of Ishgar. And now they had the clear advantage. Lame, I thought Ishgar had at least some capable warriors. Ma'am, Agil's squadron just reported in, Sir Agil is dead. One of her admirals shakingly informed the uncaring Demaria. TCH, typical. Agil has to get lucky and pick a battlefield with a strong opponent. And all I get are these losers. Demaria looked disappointed that she missed out on a great battle. In fact, she looked rather jealous of her dead comrade for having the chance to fight a fun opponent. But, Sir Agil is dead, the admiral shakingly said. Huh, so, Randy is still in Magnolia, right? This whole thing should be over before supper. Wall is even on standby near Magnolia anyway, no need to worry. Demaria casually shrugged it off. Are we done recharging the cannons? She laid back and rested her eyes. Oh yes, just now milady, then open fire already, I wanna see Randy again soon. Demaria yawned. Alright, all ships resume fire, the admiral ordered, and the warships once again began their bombardment of the port of Harjan. Kagura exhaled, and her eyes flashed open, and with intensity she swung her blade down. AAARRRGGGHHHHHH. She cried out, the slash of her blade sending shredding shockwaves that tore straight through 10 warships. Demaria's eyes shut open as she looked over the edge of her ship. Seeing half her fleet falling into the water's bellow, Demaria's baffled face was quickly replaced by a sickening malicious smirk. Her interests peaked. Kagura wasn't done however, a magic circle forming in the skies above the warships. Demaria's smirk widened along with her eyes, looking with pure excitement. Milady, the admiral was cut off, as his throat was cut open. And in Demaria's lowered arm is a now bloody dagger. Demaria began to cackle, her laughter growing more intense as she sensed the magic power building up. Good, someone I can play with. Demaria stood on the edge of her ship ready to leap down into action. The sky darkened in a shade of purple, and from the magic circle an intense pressure of gravity was unleashed from Kagura's power. The blaster fire from the ship exploded under the pressure, before the cannons could even open fire. Black smoke came from the ships as their cannons blew up. AAARRRGGHHHH. Her own soldiers cried out in agony on board, as the fire from the explosion melted away at their armor, and their skin underneath. Yet to Demaria, it meant nothing. She glanced down as her ship was losing altitude along with the remainder of her fleet. Demaria's gaze fixated on the harbor, where Kagura stood tall, her ice-cold piercing glare staring right back at Demaria. Nice. Demaria smiled with joy. I like you. Demaria merely laughed as her entire fleet was crushed underneath Kagura's gravity and her ships left immobile in the shores of Harjan. In a single move, Kagura had single-handedly taken out all of Demaria's warships, and along with them 10,000 of Demaria's soldiers. Demaria's remaining soldiers within the town of Harjan stared in disbelief as their fleet had been crushed. But even they seemed not to despair. Fools, you've merely awakened the warrior princess. One of Demaria's soldiers chuckled. Kagura took in a deep breath, sweating a bit. She took in the sight of her own handiwork. However, before she could breathe a sigh of relief, a presence appeared out of nowhere behind her. And on instinct, Kagura rotated her body around with her archenemy ready. The clang of metal clashing together echoed through the battlefield like a bell. Shockwaves blew across the town, tearing nearby buildings apart and splitting some in half. Kagura flinched, her arms wavering slightly under the strength of her foe's blade. Kagura glared at her opponent, Demaria of the Spriggan 12, the warrior queen of Alvarez wielding a massive black blade with a golden handle. You, Demaria uttered. Kagura expected a harsh remark and a look of hatred from Demaria as she had crushed her fleet. But instead, all Kagura saw was the twisted smile on Demaria's face, beaming with joy. You're pretty good, Demaria giggled with excitement. Approaching Ishgar in the raging waters of the sea, were several hundreds of warships. All led by Spriggan 12 member Neinhardt, who was on the biggest and the most equipped ship, loaded with cannons. And decorated with roses and head skull paintings. Kneeling before him were one of his knights, holding up a device with a hologram of Zirf. The knight seemed grim, his body trembling with fear, making the hologram of Zirf wobble a little. Neinhardt, it would seem Ajil has failed in his assault. I will give command over his forces to you and Demaria. Neinhardt smiled at the news, not bothered by the loss of Ajil. In fact, he was overjoyed. Now he had all the more reasons to continue with his experiments. I am honored, my lord. Neinhardt gracefully bowed before his emperor and master. How is our immortal army coming along? Once Zirf asked that question, Neinhardt cracked a snarky light grin and stepped aside, presenting this army to his master. Finished, your majesty. I gathered a lot of powerful warriors from the memories of our enemies. Although, some were too powerful for me to control, I am afraid. Such as those from the memories of your demons. Neinhardt referred to Itachi, Kisame, Kakuzu, Sasori and Madara even. Oh, is there any way to gain control over these mighty warriors? Zirf desired these warriors, the stronger his army was the better. Acknowledgia, Madara and Fairy Tail wouldn't stand a chance against him and his empire. Maybe if I gained a boost from Lady Irene. Although I am afraid that this, Hashirama Senju, was it. Will be impossible for me to control, even with Lady Irene's power boosting up my magic. And one called Shisui Uchiha, would be able to cancel out my control, so he is a lost cause regardless. Although Neinhardt despite this didn't seem discouraged, in fact he looked rather confident. But I am certain, that it won't be necessary. These warriors should be plenty strong enough to annihilate your enemies. Behind Neinhardt, standing at the upper deck of his warship, was an armada of undead warriors. Lined up, enemies of the past. The members of Trinity Raven, Ikaruga, Fukuro, Vidaldus Taka. The former master of Oracion Cease, Zero. The master and the majority of the members of Grimoire Heart, Hades, Zancro, Rustyros, Kane, Azuma. Members of Tartaros, Marred Gear, Kyoka, Sela, Tempester, Jackal, Torafuzar, Keys, Easel, Franmalf. Not only do they have mighty foes of the past to face, but also former friends that might make them emotional. Neinhardt sadistically smirked. Lined up next to the enemies of the past were old friends. The older brother of Kagura, Simon Mikazuchi, one of the founders of Fairy Tail, and the father of Makarov. Yuri Drayar, and the third one, to some a master and teacher, to another a mother, and to a broken man a lover, the Ice Witcher Milkovich. Don't hate me too much now, Madara, this is a war after all. Neinhardt snickered within his mind, imagining the face of Madara when he learns of this. Then there are of course, those from another world entirely. Although that Kisame, Sasori and Kakuzu didn't have anyone particular close to them that could be useful and within my control. And in order to save up as much magic power as possible, I limited myself to these three. Seeing the three figures, Zirf himself couldn't help but give a light menacing chuckle. Ah, the perfect irony. The past sins of his old family, coming back to haunt him and his current family. Lined up alongside Simon and Yuri, were three figures that all bore the Uchiha insignia. Itachi Uchiha's former lover, and a hand-to-hand combatant specialist, Izumi Uchiha. Not all that powerful, but still lived to become as strong as some of the 9 demon gates or the 7 kin of purgatory. And with an infinite pool of energy and stamina, she should prove to be quite useful. And of course, Itachi Uchiha's own mother and father, Makoto Uchiha and Fugaku Uchiha. Neinhardt sweated a bit, seemingly tired over how much magic he had to use. Although I must admit, controlling Fugaku Uchiha will prove to be challenging. Especially without Lady Irene's enchantments. This man is even stronger than I am, and stronger than Ajil was. Although, I should still be able to control him. Neinhardt, your Historia magic seems different from before, Zirf pointed out, noticing that the bodies of these warriors looked like they had just been dug up. Their bodies were a bit pale and gray, and their bodies covered in cracks, even their clothing had cracks. And their eyes were empty and hollow. Ah yes, I took some inspiration from this Edo Tensei I learned about from this world of shinobi. Instead of being mere illusions, they are actually artificial created bodies used from real people. Not only that, I have been able to drag their actual spirits and souls from the netherworld and force them to fight. Zirf looked a bit skeptical, and slightly saddened that the dead had been disrupted from their rest. Although it was worth it in his mind. I see, does it work just like the Edo Tensei then? Yes, but although I couldn't make it exactly alike, I still have much to learn it would seem. Like the Edo Tensei, I used bodies of living people to create their bodies for their souls to inhabit. And like the Edo Tensei, I can control them and force them to fight even if they themselves do not wish for it. And they are even granted with an infinite supply of Ethernano, or rather chakra for our 3 otherworldly friends here. And they have infinite stamina as well. And the drawbacks. Zeref's glare intensified, wanting to make sure Neinhardt wouldn't fail in his assignment. Ah yes, Neinhardt sweated a little nervously facing his Emperor's glare, even if only through a hologram. Well, although their bodies will regenerate if damaged. If their bodies are completely destroyed, I cannot hold their spirits here and they will depart back to the netherworld. So, unlike the Edo Tensei, they can stop this magic even if I am dead. Like I said, this is an imperfect version of the Edo Tensei, but still rather effective. Neinhardt gave a reassuring smile to his Emperor and looked confident. But I doubt that will ever happen. I will stay out of the battlefield, but I will need to be within a certain range to control them. It would also help if you can contact Lady Irene and ask her to boost up my abilities, that way I can increase my range, and bring in more warriors to our aid. Very well, begin your assault, Neinhardt. Do not fail me like Ajil did. Zeref's eyes turned red with anger, and Neinhardt swallowed a nervous lump in his throat. The hologram faded, and Neinhardt began trembling. Not out of fear, but anger. Just you wait, Your Majesty, once I become a true master of life and death. Nothing can ever threaten me again. Neinhardt with a flick of his fingers spread his magic to his dead armada, to which some begun emitting from their bodies. As a result, the cracks on their bodies faded, their skin regained their color from when they were alive. And their dark hollow eyes began to glow. The Alvarez Knights merely trembled, some flinched in slight disgust at such a perverse form of magic from their leader. Now, the real fight begins. Neinhardt cackled in a sickening laughter, the islands of Ishgar within his sights. In the city of Magnolia, within the Fairy Tale Guildhall, Makarov Dreyer could finally breathe easily. It was unbelievable to him. They had managed taken down one of the Spriggan 12. It made Makarov all the more impressed with Itachi's former comrades within the Akatsuki. We somehow managed to fend off their vanguard, however, we're not out of the woods yet. Woo, this brings back memories. Warad cackled next to Makarov. Makarov looking bewildered at the sudden outburst from his senior and founding member of his guild. It reminds me of the good old days. When Yuri, Precht and I would battle during the trade war. The old tree man spoke with nostalgia over his former comrades and their adventures. Itachi's crow clone analyzed the map with Warren, the telepathy mage looking terrified. Itachi saw Warren's concerns as valid. Ajil's death barely meant much. It had been a victory to them for sure. With Ajil's death they had managed to prove the 12 weren't invincible. The morale of their troops had increased because of it. But the fact remained they were still outnumbered, and Magnolia still had a deal of Alvarez Knights wreaking havoc. And from their reports, Harjan was the area on the battlefield where they had it the worst. The majority of their forces had been taken by surprise and killed from invading airships. Itachi, Warren, any suggestions? Makarov asked from his seat, realizing the dire situation. The stress of the battle taking its toll on the old man. From the looks of it, the defense squad in Harjan needs backup. Whilst both the attack squads in the north and south of Ishgar remain uncertain. And our people in Magnolia seem to be gaining the situation under control. But I wouldn't rule out anything just yet. It's still too early, Itachi analyzed. And known to all current members of Fairy Tail, the spirit form of Mavis Vermilion levitated next to Itachi, whispering into his ear. We should send some reinforcements over to Harjan effective immediately. Itachi voiced out Mavis' suggestion, without raising suspicion amongst non-current members. I will go. Laxus stormed in through the guild hall doors, carrying an unconscious Freed, Bixlo, Evergreen and Uchiha on his back. Lightning striking in the background to signify his anger. I will track down the bastard who took these guys out. As noble as that is Laxus. You are needed here in Magnolia. Besides, there is no guarantee that whoever did this to Freed and the others will be in Harjan. We need you to stay focused. Itachi instantly shut down Laxus, knowing it was the better strategic move. He didn't need Mavis to tell him that. No, we are sending Wizard Saint Beatrice with some spare troops. Send also Macbeth and Eric, they have done their jobs in Magnolia. Right, I will brief the council and Lady Beatrice then of the situation. Warren nodded, and just as he was about to call up the council, the entire city of Magnolia fell suddenly under a ton of pressure. It was like a Geel all over again, although slightly stronger. But nothing Itachi hadn't felt before. One of the 12, Makarov spoke with dread. There was one more in the city this whole time. Warren gasped as this Spriggan had gone under the radar of his sensor. And no way, whoever it is, they are facing Lucy and Kana. Laxus. Itachi looked to the lightning mage, only to find him already gone. Having taken off like a bolt of lightning the moment he heard who was involved. On the farther side of Magnolia, there was Brandish of the Spriggan 12. Standing face to face with Lucy and Kana. Small rocks levitating in the air around them from the sheer level of power unleashed by Brandish. Lu, you fought this chick on Caracalla, right? Could you maybe tell me what I am in for? Kana stood unwavering before Brandish, although the sweat running down her forehead along with her legs trembling gave away her fear. Well, Itachi was the one who really fought her. Me and Levi just took down her second in command, but this chick is bad news. She can change and alter the mass of people and objects within her range. Although she can only focus on one thing at a time, our best bet would be to attack her together and keep our distance, but then again she did shrink the island the size of a mere rock. Lucy, like Kana, stood bravely before Brandish, although she was also afraid to go up against such a threat. As much as I would love to kill Layla's daughter, my priority is to capture Fairy Heart for His Majesty. So, where is Mavis Vermilion? Brandish gave a cold glare at the two fairy tale girls who in her mind were barely worth her time. Lucy didn't mind Brandish's threats. Lucy's mind was focused elsewhere. She was focused on the broken key of Aquarius in Brandish's hand. That key, give it back, Lucy mustered the courage to utter. Brandish tilted her head sideways, her gaze for a swift second looking to the broken key of Aquarius within the palm of her own hand. Give it back. Why would I return something that isn't even yours? Brandish's glare intensified as she glared daggers of hatred at Lucy. Lucy gasped as the very next moment, blood spilled out from her side. As what appeared to be a long needle had sliced against the side of her waist. Brandish's foot standing on a broken nail from the building, having tilted it up just enough to change the trajectory to hit Lucy when she altered the length of it using her magic. Kana sprang into action, wielding a series of magic cards in the palm of her hand. The cards catching fire with flames, and with a flick of her wrist she threw them to circle around Brandish, aiming for her back. Command T. Expansion. A mere pebble grew to the size of a rock wall, catching the flaming tarot cards. The tarot cards bursting in a blazing inferno, melting the pebble. You wanna go, bitch? No one hurts my friends. Kana slammed a card to the floor. The prayer's fountain. Erupting out from the card was a massive flow of water, the water dividing itself into beams charging at Brandish. Command T. Reduction. The water shrunk into mere thin shower beams, yet Kana didn't seem bothered by it. In fact, Kana smirked. You fell for it, Kana snickered. As the water beams that collided with Brandish's left hand, she felt this sudden surge of pain as the water pierced through her hand. Kana quickly followed up with a second prayer's fountain card, and Brandish took action and leapt away from the deadly beams of water. Command T. Reduction. Brandish used her magic on the hole in her hand, to shrink it into nothing, essentially healing herself. Star dress. Sagittarius form. Lucy leapt into the air, her clothing glowing in a brilliant light that enveloped her entire being. Her outfit changing into a twin-tailed coat and sleeves that left her shoulders and upper back bare. A pair of dark thigh-high boots. And her hair was styled into a typical upper ponytail with two bangs framing her face. And to top it off, the zodiac sign of Sagittarius on her left shoulder. Star shot. Lucy, wielding a bow and arrow, shot a series of energy-based homing arrows. The arrows homing straight onto Brandish. Brandish clicked her tongue in frustration, levitating up a corpse of a dead fairy tale mage, and expanding her body into that of a giant. Brandish used the corpse as a meat shield, catching the arrows that exploded upon contact. Using the bodies of the dead as a shield. Damn you. Kana spat her words out in venom over seeing one of their own being used as a meat shield. I will blow you away. In the name of our guild and those that died. A tattoo appeared printed onto Kana's right forearm, a high concentration of light gathering around her arm as she directed it towards Brandish, who was preoccupied keeping off Lucy's fire of arrows. Gather, O river of light that guides the fairies. Shine, in order to perish the fangs of evil. Following Kana's chanting of the spell, a massive ring of light suddenly gathered around Brandish. The country demolisher sweating a bit at this sudden explosion of Ethernano coming from Kana. Fairy glitter. Command T. Expansion. Brandish was quick to act. The body she had used as a shield shrunk to normal as she had to redirect her focus. And what followed was a brilliant tower of light bursting to life in the city. The massive explosion pillar of light nearly penetrating the skies above. The mighty winds of the explosion, blowing Lucy out from the sky and next to Kana. The celestial mage shielding her eyes at the blinding light from fairy glitter. Kana poured all of her magic power into this attack, aiming to end it as quickly as possible. But something just didn't sit well with Lucy. This felt too easy. As the light began to fade, Lucy and Kana suddenly found themselves overshadowed by a giant. The shadow cast over not only them but Magnolia as well. Standing tall, was Brandish, as tall as a perfect Susanoo, as tall as a dragon. She looked down on them as they were mere ants, smoke erupting from her body left by fairy glitter. Along with her right leg having suffered some bruises and burns from the blast. That was quite impressive. You would have made an excellent second in command for one of the 12. Unfortunately, by expanding the mass of my own body, I also increase its strength and endurance. And now, I will squash you like bugs. Brandish raised her foot, aiming to crush them in one fell swoop. Open gate of the Golden Bull, Taurus. Open gate of the Ram, Aries. Star dress mix. Taurus x Aries form. Lucy entered her Taurus star dress form, mixing it with ram horns growing out from her head. Her arms covered in pink wool arm warmers and a woolen scarf around her neck. With the Taurus zodiac sign on her right shoulder, and Aries on the left. Using her enhanced strength, Lucy caught Brandish foot, using Aries wool to soften the blow as well as summoning Taurus to help her hold back Brandish's foot, and Aries to increase the amount of wool. Go, Kana. Lucy struggled to hold Brandish back, being almost brought to her knees from the crushing weight of giant form Brandish's boot. Right. Kana leapt back, readying to attack as she looked up to glare at Brandish, although what she was met with was not what she expected. So fluffy. Brandish smiled and giggled, speaking in a childlike manner. Her facial expression warm and carefree as she enjoyed the comfy wool of Aries. Kana was so caught off guard that she halted in her attack. Kana looked dumbfounded as she stared at their supposed enemy. Lu, maybe make more of that wool instead. Lucy, unable to see or grasp what was going on, could only look confused. Yet she complied, and with Aries they both generated enough wool to make a bed for the giant form of Brandish. The extreme fluffiness of the wool, causing Brandish to step back, giving Lucy some breathing room. To which the celestial mage like Kana looked dumbfounded as she saw Brandish hugging the wool. Hey, so fluffy. If she had not been their enemy, both Kana and Lucy would have described this as a cute scene unfolding. What? No. Brandish then snapped back to reality, and brushed the wool off, looking a little saddened at having to part ways with its fluffiness. I must focus on the task at hand. Brandish, like a monster, ripped off the roof of a building and tossed it down onto Kana and Lucy. Lucy springing into action. Lucy punch. Using the strength of her Taurus dress form, the roof shattered upon contact with her fist. Lucy rushed at Brandish, while Kana threw her tarot cards cloaked in lightning to distract Brandish. The thunder strikes from the cards stung against Brandish's skin, yet she wasn't blinded by the fact that Lucy was a greater threat. Raising her giant fist, and Lucy her tiny yet powerful fist. Lucy leapt towards Brandish, and Brandish swung her fist down on Lucy. Both their fists connecting, creating a large boom sound followed by a shockwave that blew away the tiles of the roads of Magnolia, and blew away nearby buildings. Neither side giving in, both locked in a power struggle. Brandish was amazed that a celestial wizard possessed such power. Maybe she owed Marin an apology after all. Lucy Heartfilia was different from any celestial wizard she had ever encountered. Yet Brandish knew she could end this battle in an instant. All she needed to do was expand Lucy's heart to the point it exploded in her chest. The sound of thunder rang in the skies above, and coming raining down onto Brandish's head was none other than Laxus, cloaked in lighting, delivering a drop kick. Ouch! Brandish grunted as the sudden force of impact from Laxus knocked the giant form of Brandish to her knees. You are not the one who took down Freed's group, but I'm going to make you tell me who it was. Laxus snarled as he glared down at Brandish, lightning flickering around his bare upper body. TCH, another one from that guild. Brandish clicked her tongue in frustration upon spotting Laxus' guild emblem. Now then, Laxus, with a clench of his fist, unleashed all of his power at once. Creating a massive flow of lightning surging around him, the ground cracking open from the lightning surging through it. Thunderbolts violently raining down around him. Shall we get to it? Brandish glared at Laxus, although in her current state he was rather tiny. She was amazed at the sheer level of power emitting from him. To think, they had a wizard that could rival a member of the 12 besides that Itachi, Brandish thought, a smile appearing on her face. Her giant body shrinking back into her normal size. Laxus, Lucy and Kanna all remained on guard. The two girls rather confident they could maybe take down Brandish now that Laxus had come to back them up. They all looked on edge, as Brandish slowly raised both her arms up. "I surrender," Brandish declared, and just like that the tension vanished. The three fairy tale wizards gaped in surprise. It would be a pain to continue. "I surrender." Brandish held her hands out, awaiting to be cuffed. Kanna reached into her pouch, bringing out a set of anti-magic chain cuffs in the case of an enemy surrendering. Kanna steadily, carefully approached the country demolisher of the Spriggan 12. Kanna carefully looking for even the slightest suspicious movement in Brandish, Laxus doing the same and ready to attack in case of just that. Brandish merely smiled at how nervous they all looked, truly it was a testament to her might. Kanna then cuffed her, and Brandish instantly felt that her flow of Ethernano was disrupted. "See, no trouble." Brandish's smile didn't ease their minds. Laxus grabbed onto Brandish's arm and pulled her with him. "We're taking her to the cells built into the cellar of the guild. Let's go." For safety measures Kanna also cuffed Brandish's ankles. Lucy returned Aries and Taurus to the celestial realm, and returned into her normal form. But before moving, Lucy snatched the broken Aquarius key from Brandish. Her eyes a bit watery over almost having lost what was left of a close friend. Brandish carefreely eyeing Lucy's watery eyes with an emotionless glance. The walk back to the guild was filled with an awkward silence. And the occasion of Laxus having to blast away Alvarez knights attempting to rescue Brandish. Once they got to the guild hall, they all stopped for a moment to look at their prisoner before opening the gates. "Cause any trouble, and you're dead," Laxus warned, and Brandish playfully held up her hands. "No trouble." Brandish smiled playfully at them. Hesitantly Laxus opened the gates to the guild allowing the captured Brandish to enter. And they were instantly met with looks of suspicion and whispers, as everyone looked on edge at the presence of one of the 12. Approaching them to inspect the prisoner, was Itachi's crow clone, Makarov and Warid. "So, this is one of the rumored Spriggan 12. My word, such a young lady." Warid spoke with intrigue at his first encounter with their nation's enemy. "And you are Warid of the 10 wizard saints. One of the 4 gods if Ishgar. God Serena told us all about you and the rest of the saints." Brandish confidently declared as she looked fearless in the face of Warid, Itachi and Makarov. "Brandish, you never struck me as the surrendering type." Makarov looked wary of the presence of Brandish, although he had to admit she was one of the more pleasant members of the 12. "Perhaps not Makarov, but I am a negotiable type of person. I would say there is only one other like me amongst the 12. Brandish greeted Makarov with a small bow. Very well, take her to the cellar," Makarov instructed, waving for Mikao and Wakaba to come and escort their prisoner. "With all due respect, I don't think that is wise," Itachi interjected. He clearly wasn't convinced by this whole prisoner act. "Her magic power is blocked out. She doesn't pose a threat at the moment. I don't see the problem," Kanna voiced out as she handed Brandish over to Mikao and Wakaba, who both gave a nervous gulp from looking at Brandish's assets. "PFFT, just like Marin," Brandish scoffed, sounding a bit disgusted from the looks she got from the 2 older gentlemen. "I kinda agree with Itachi, something just seems off," Lucy also voiced out her concern. "I mean, she gave up rather easily considering she was able to go toe-to-toe with Itachi on Caracol Island." "What, you think me and Laxus don't equal up to Itachi?" Kanna teased Lucy a bit with a smirk. "Relax, okay Lu. We simply had her outnumbered, and with a powerhouse like Laxus, she gave up." "I don't know Kanna," Lucy uttered, her mind still not eased. Itachi's clone leaned in closer to Lucy, whispering into her ear. "Keep a close eye on our new guest." Lucy, without looking at Itachi, gave a quick nod, and followed after Mikao and Wakaba as they escorted Brandish to the cellar. As Brandish was thrown into her cell, she sat down onto the cold floor. Paying no mind to the guards that were Mikao and Wakaba. "I'm in," she smirked. Flashback. "You want me to what?" Brandish raised a brow, as she had been approached by the ice wizard Invul. "I want you to let yourself get captured by the enemy, and infiltrate the fairy tale guild hall. Inval repeated his request to Brandish, Marin popping out of nowhere from behind him. Marin shall later infiltrate the Fairy Tail Guildhall using his space magic, set you free, and then you can destroy them from the inside. Find Fairy Heart, and deliver it to His Majesty. With your magic, such a task is only something you can do. You can count on me, Brandish-sama. Marin gave a salute, and smiled brightly at his master. So what, I just surrender to them? Brandish didn't think this would work. According to God Serena, there weren't nearly enough mages in Ishgard that could match one of the 12. No, of course not. You put on a good enough of a show, and surely someone powerful enough will come running to their comrades' aid. Once that happens, and you see the time is right, you shall surrender to them. Tell them you are willing to negotiate terms. Inval finished explaining Brandish's task in this war. With her magic, getting Fairy Heart wasn't much of a trouble. In fact, her and Marin were the perfect pair to retrieve such an object. Does His Majesty know of this plan? Brandish asked, seeing as Zirf didn't bring it up at the briefing. No, he wants to destroy them with all our might. But I agree with you on one thing. In the case of Madara interfering, obtaining Fairy Heart will be difficult. This is our best option. It is for the best of the Empire, and most of all for our Emperor. Inval stated, holding nothing but Zerif's well-being in his mind. For His Majesty, and for Alvarez, I shall complete my mission without fail. Brandish accepted her task. Flashback end. Now all I need is to sit back, relax, and wait for my loyal pet to set me free. Brandish smirked and laid down onto the cold floor, wanting to take a nap whilst waiting. And lurking out in the streets of Magnolia, was the space magic specialist and second in command of Brandish's squad, Marin. Yufufu, Brandish-sama has been captured. Oh dear, time for revenge, Marin excitedly licked his lips. Meanwhile, at the port town of Harjin, the remains of Kagura's squad, which consisted of less than 100, were up against a large majority of enemy troops. How freaking many are there? Toby panted as he had tried to use his paralyzed nail magic on the knights, but could barely get through their dense armor. About 2,000 left, I would say. Yuka shielded both himself and Toby using his wave magic. Even after Kagura took out all those ships, Urania was just about pass out from fatigue. She had about used up the reserves of her second origin. Where is Kagura anyway? Risley charged like a freight train straight through a horde of enemies, knocking them aside. I don't think she moved from the port. Beth ducked as a blade from an Alvarez knight flung over her head, cutting her pigtails a bit. In a swift motion she bombarded him with a giant carrot from the ground. Trailing sky arrow, Sharia flew in, black wind cloaked around the tip of her foot like a spear, as she thrusted it straight through an Alvarez knight's armor plate. Followed by a second black wind cloaked kick to the neck, to which all that was heard was a snap. Look out, Sharia! Carla in her human form roundhouse kicked a charging knight, followed by Wendy unleashing a mighty roar breath attack, blowing hundreds of knights away. More and more knights were trapped inside the playing cards of Sho. Yet even he started to feel the fatigue on his body. There are just too many of them. Miliana stood back to back with Sho, using her magical kitten rope to tie up as many knights as possible. A real man faces any obstacle. Dandy. Wally split himself into various cubes, blasting magic shot after magic shot like a madman. Ah, Wally, behind you. Once Wally had reformed, a stealth user knight from the Empire had revealed himself. Wielding a magic blade, ready to behead Wally. Sho didn't have time to act, and neither did Wally. Out of my way, coming zooming by, was Sawyer, knocking the knight over and snapping his neck in one swift motion. Sawyer stopped up to stretch his legs, although when he looked at Wally, he seemed bewildered. Huh, hey Richard, there is a guy here that is kinda blocky like you. Sawyer pointed it out as a joke, unbeknownst of what this would mean for his comrade or Wally. Huh, Richard appeared, and looked over to Wally. Both standing in an awkward silence, staring at each other. Who are you? Wally lowered his sunglasses, revealing his eyes. And that is when something in Richard clicked, the image of a young bright smiling boy with the same kind eyes coming to mind. Wally, Richard stuttered, visibly shaking. Yeah, do I know you? Wally felt himself there was something familiar about this tall blocky looking man before him. But he couldn't quite place his finger on it. Wally looked even more startled, once Richard began to weep tears of unfathomable joy. And out of nowhere Richard hoisted Wally up in a bear hug. Wally, Richard cried his name. P put me down. This ain't dandy. Wally squirmed in his brother's embrace. Oh Wally, I had always hoped to see you again. Look at you, all grown up. You are no longer the same little boy that so sweetly shared that potato with me." Once Richard said that, something in Wally clicked as well. And he looked in sheer and utter disbelief. "Be big bro Richard." Wally stuttered in disbelief, and was met with the smiling face of his brother. On a closer look, there was a resemblance. I thought you were dead. And you. Until Titania Urza told me otherwise." Richard held Wally close, whilst Sawyer, although happy for his comrade, was a little annoyed. He had to hold of enemy troops during this reunion. "Bro." Wally started to tremble, tears building up in his eyes. He quickly wiped his tears, but still smiled as he flicked his sunglasses back on. "Man, it's good to see you. Nya, so touching." Miliana cried at the heartwarming scene before them. "Hey, well, I'll be damned," Sho smiled, happy to see his comrade reunited with his brother. Guys, as touching as this is, we have a war to fight." Sawyer broke the moment, as he started to get overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemies. "Oh, do not worry little Wally." Richard beamed with a smile, as the ground before the enemies split open, devouring a great chunk of them. "Your big bro will protect you from now on and forever," Richard declared, smiling. "That ain't really dandy big bro." Wally's sweat dropped. Touching to say the least. A slash at blinding speed appeared before Sawyer, slashing a wound across his chest. Although Demira-sama wouldn't approve, standing before them was a young frail woman with silver white hair in the same style as Demaria's. Her eyes as red as fresh blood, and her skin as pale as a ghost. "I am Linda, second in command of Lady Demaria's squad." Her arms were bandaged up from her wrists to her shoulders, her lower face hidden by a black mask giving her the appearance of a ninja. Her attire consisting of a torn red scarf, a black leotard cladded in armor around her flat chest, and her knees also cladded in shining black armor pads. She wielded dual short black swords. As she beat my speed. Sawyer looked baffled. Speed? Such poor imitation of time magic disgusts me. At least when compared to the divine power of Lady Demaria. In her name, I shall carve the true meaning of speed into your minds. Linda bent her right knee down a bit, while sliding her left foot back a bit. Richard, who was just reunited with his little brother, wasn't about to let harm come to Wally and thus put on a serious face. His eyes glowing, liquefying the ground beneath Linda. Yet the assassin saw it coming, leaping up into the air, twirling her body like a dancer. Her blade aiming for Richard's face. "Arg!" Richard cried out, unable to dodge, as Linda's blade sliced over his left eye. Blood gushing out from his eye socket. Richard quickly altered the liquid ground into spikes beneath Linda, who weaved and dodged them without effort. Richard suddenly felt a stabbing pain in his back, as a second Linda appeared out from his shadow, stabbing him with her blade. My magic ability is to create duplicates from my enemy's own shadows. That and speed magic. Next to Jacob-sama, I am the second greatest assassin alive. More duplicates of Linda leapt out from all their shadows, surrounding them with blades in hand. "Begone, small fry. Not on my watch." Sho then with his quick thinking trapped the duplicates within his playing cards. "No matter how many you make, I will seal them away." Sho smirked at Linda, who cast him a deadly glare. Richard smiled with ease, pleased to see Wally having such a friend. Although their feelings of relief were replaced with a sense of dread. As this sickening magic power filled the air, giving a chilling feeling of death. Even the Alvarez Knights looked immobilized like them from this feeling. Linda even halted in her steps. What kind of warrior does your group have, I wonder? That can make even Lady Demaria use this much power. Linda pondered on what kind of opponent her master had found. Down at the port, pebbles and drops of water from the sea levitated in the air around them. Their combined power acting like a natural disaster. Kagura and Demaria were locked with their blades, neither showing sign of having the edge over the other. Although, Demaria barely looked to be putting up much of struggle, as she just smiled. Nice, I like you. Your reaction speed is top-notch." Kagura, on the other hand, looked like she struggled a bit, as a bead of sweat dripped from her forehead. This woman, what is this insane level of magic power? I can feel she is still even hiding more. Kagura, using all her strength, pushed Demaria back a few steps. "Ho." Demaria tilted her head a bit to the side. "Not bad. So, this is one of the 12. Kagura readied herself, entering her battle stance. Demaria's smile faded for a second, as she looked in awe. Her stance, the best way to describe it would be perfect. I can't find a single weak spot in her defenses. Whoever taught her, might be even more efficient with the blade than me. Demaria licked her lips with a lusting gaze for battle. Nice, do treat me kindly. Kagura frowned at this feeling of mockery she got from Demaria. My best bet is to remain on the defensive, get a good look at her technique before. Unable to finish her thought, Demaria suddenly appeared before her. Kagura's mind unable to register what happened, as in her eyes Demaria hadn't moved. Demaria while smiling slashed her blade down on Kagura. And, as Demaria had expected, Kagura blocked the strike with her blade. Truly her reaction speed was great. All this managed to do, however, was excite Demaria even more. Pulling a dagger from a knife sheath strapped on her shoulder, Demaria raised the dagger aiming for Kagura's face. Kagura intensified her aura, pushing Demaria's massive blade back and swinging her body around fast enough to knock the dagger out from Demaria's hand. Kagura followed by raising her blade above her head, and swinging it down upon Demaria. HMPH. Huffing and moving faster than Kagura could register, Demaria had stepped aside to avoid the slash. Smiling with confidence as she looked down on Kagura from the corner of her eye. Demaria readied herself to strike Kagura with her blade. As Kagura in this situation, which could only be described as bad for a swordsman or woman, as the sheer weight of her blade would prevent one from halting in their swing. However, with her level of experience, Kagura was able to halt her blade mere inches from the ground, and counter Demaria by swinging her blade upwards aiming for her head. Demaria was a bit taken aback, quickly tilting her upper body backwards but not in time for Kagura's blade to cut off some of Demaria's bangs. Her strains of golden blonde hair flowing in the wind before her face. However, it didn't end there as Kagura's blade released a powerful shockwave that hit Demaria in the chin. Demaria flew a little over the ground, blood escaping from her lips and her face looking flabbergasted, trying to register in her mind what just happened. With a swift move, Kagura swung her blade sideways aiming to cut Demaria in half. Demaria clicked her teeth together, and in Kagura's vision she moved like a blur and appeared behind her. Never before had Kagura witnessed such speed, not even from Itachi. While in Demaria's vision, she had first landed her feet to the ground, before taking a backflip over Kagura and her blade who moved in slow motion. And ending with Demaria elegantly landing behind her. You understand, don't you? If I wanted to, you would be dead right now. Demaria pointed out, and Kagura couldn't deny it. If Demaria so wished she could have killed Kagura right there and then. Then why didn't you? Kagura narrowed her eyes on Demaria, turning around to face her opponent. You are a virgin, correct? The sudden question caused Kagura to blush red and stutter. What does that have to do with anything? Kagura raised her voice, as her face was flushed. Yet she somehow managed to remain on guard. Yeah, that's what I thought. Demaria huffed with an amused smirk at Kagura's reaction. To me, sex and battle are kinda the same thing. We haven't even gotten to the climax yet. This is just the foreplay, sweetheart. I tend to want to enjoy myself for as long as possible, just like in a battle. Usually, I encounter weaklings that fail to reach the climax, and that is when I kill them. If they succeed, however, I will take them as my pets. Just like dear Linda. Revolting. Kagura spat in disgust, which only seemed to please Demaria. To treat warriors with such disrespect, I shall cut you down. And if I am to fail, I would rather end my own life than become your pet. Kagura's fierce determination in that declaration sparked something in Demaria, who smiled in delight. Nice, I thought there was something about you. Demaria giggled as she got more and more riled up about this battle. You are just like my sweet adorable Randy. The two locked blades once again. This time the tremor sent around them rallied the ocean into giant waves, and causing the ground beneath them to sink into a crater. Through all this rumbling, all one could hear was Demaria's sickening laughter. Meanwhile, back at the Fairy Tale Guildhall, the scanners of Warren suddenly started going haywire as multiple energy signatures appeared out of nowhere. Guys, Warren stuttered, as he pointed at the map detecting more energy sources appearing out of nowhere. What is that? Itachi raised his brow. The energy signatures that appeared were all massive. It was like there was no end to it. They just appeared on the map out of nowhere. The sensors should have picked them up a long time ago. Warren then halted. Reports from the battlefield coming in. We've got reported sightings of enemies with Sharingan. This put Itachi on alarm. Madara. And no, there are 3 of them, and they just single-handedly annihilated all the guilds stationed in Bosco. Warren's body quivered in fear. 3 people had destroyed all the guilds of one of Fiore's neighboring nations, Bosco. The nation of Bosco was on fire. Like all the guilds in Ishgar, they had gotten the warning from Warren. And most of the civilians had managed to get out. The guilds of Bosco had prepared to join the war to aid Fiore, but had quickly been taken over. They were supposed to meet up with Sting's squad to join the fight. Burning piles of bodies were spread across the battlefield like a war zone. Buildings having been reduced to little more than burning piles of rubble. 2 Spriggan 12 members Larcade and Bloodman had started the massacre of this nation in search of their missing member Irene. And been met with unexpected backup from Nineheart. I must say, Nineheart's magic is rather perverse. Although, these 3, they are not mages and they do not possess Ethernano. Larcade looked intrigued as he and Bloodman watched the massacre unfold. They are rather efficient in battle. Although Nineheart's corpses are supposed to be drawn to people who are close to them. So why they are here I have no idea. Bloodman had noticed their Sharingan, and wondered if they were here because Madara was nearby. Or maybe, because Itachi Uchiha was nearby. A little boy, who couldn't be any older than Romeo, was backed up against the wall of a burning building. An older looking couple, that probably were his parents, laid dead burnt on the ground before him. The boy was trembling, tears rolling down his cheeks. His shoulder marked with a Wizarding Guild emblem. He huffed, gathering his bravery, his hand igniting with a magic circle. Standing tall and looming over him, was the dark menacing figure of Fugaku Uchiha, his face darkened and only illuminated by his Sharingan. Behind Fugaku moved a female figure, her eyes blazing red with the Sharingan. And jumping at her were 4 attackers all bearing the same guild mark as the boy. The woman, Makoto Uchiha, flashed a set of hand seals, and sprayed them with a wave of a blazing inferno of flames. Their screams of agony echoing for a second, before being silenced the next, leaving only the sounds of the fire burning. While the second female figure, that was Izumi Uchiha, was surrounded by at least 10 men. Considering her small slender figure, and her being only at the age of 13. One wouldn't think she was a warrior. But her slender body made her very nimble. She was easily able to avoid their attacks, and despite her frail figure, she didn't lack any strength. As one kick from Izumi was enough to twist a man's neck a full 360 degrees. Wielding kunai knives, she made quick work of them. Makoto and Izumi soon then joined Fugaku, who had cornered the little boy. The voice of Nineheart cackling in the back of their mind. Do it, and his spell binding them to comply with his wishes. Although Fugaku managed to struggle and avoid total control, so he remained conscious of his actions. But that wasn't a good thing to Fugaku, at least. He only looked at the whimpering boy with a look of pity. Forgive me, Fugaku uttered, and then all one could hear was the groaning of flesh and bone being cut open by a blade. As the boy dropped dead before them, such an accursed jutsu, it can only be the Edo Tensei, but these people are not shinobi. Why are we here to fight? Before Fugaku could continue to wonder, he was forcibly moved by Nineheart along with his wife and his oldest son's lover. They were moving in on Fiore, and closing in on Sting's squad, where Itachi had one of his clones. And where their ancestor Madara was also close by. Back in Magnolia, Warren gasped as another nation up north of Ishgar was being attacked. The Kingdom of Seven is also being invaded and pushed out. Laying waste to the magic guilds in Seven was the Ice Mage herself, her expression looking baffled and horrified at finding herself not in control of her actions. And with her was Zancro of Grimoire Heart along with Rustairos, Kane, Azuma. What is going on? How come so many with this high energy levels equal to that of the 12 are attacking one area? Makarov questioned where all these people came from. Did the Empire had more elite forces besides members of the 12? Something's not right. Itachi couldn't put his finger on it. 3 other people with the Sharingan. The only ones he knew off in this world with the Sharingan were himself, Madara and Ultir. Did Madara have more children that were working for the Empire? Or worse, had Zirf perhaps taken his time to resurrect more dead Uchiha of the past into his demons? More strong energies detected in Harjan. Warren raised the alarm with concern. And even more in the Southern Isles. Within the port of Harjan once again, making short work of some rune knights as they walked out from the sea itself. Once flashing with sparks of lightning, the other oozing with darkness. Yuri Drayar and Prek, now Hades the master of Grimoire Heart, tore easily through the rune knights and their defenses, advancing through town and ignoring the battles going on around them. With one destination in mind, where they sensed those that held them close to their hearts. In Magnolia, the Fairy Tale Guildhall. Following them, was a sickening green wave of magic power, ripping a bunch of mages and knight alike to shreds. Followed by a maniacal laughter, was the Master of Oracion Cease, Zero. Rushing straight into battle, at the presence of two of his traitorous guild members. And rising from the ocean with them, were the Trinity Raven from the Tower of Heaven, led by the pink-haired swordswoman Ikaruga. Unlike Yuri and Hades, they went straight for the battlefield, sensing the presence of three that were present at the time of their death at the battlefield. Sho, Wally and Miliana. And finally, was the lone lonely figure, of Simon Mikazuchi. Sensing the presence of three of his comrades, and another he had long thought to be lost. Ignore her, Demaria's got it. Go in for the others. The sickening voice of Nineheart commanded in Simon's head, and so he as well went into battle. While down in the southern isles, they were still in aerial battle over the islands. Blaster fire being fired from both sides in their warships, while their individual ground forces fought bellow. Although soon found themselves overwhelmed, not just from the millions of Alvarez Knights, but also all the resurrected Tartaros members. All brought here to their connection to their fellow demon brethren, E.N.D., one in particular also brought here from their connection to Urza being Kyoka. And of course, their connection to their creator, Zirf. Down on the ground, Bacchus from Quattro Cerberus was making short work of a lot of Alvarez Knights with his drunken boxing. Along with the rest of his guildmates, all acing like wild animals as they attacked the enemy. Oi, master, can't believe you even decided to fight. Bacchus grinned as he bumped the heads of two knights together. Well, even I get tired from standing at the sidelines. The master of Quattro Cerberus, and former member of Fairy Tale and Team Makarov, Goldmine, with a flick of his finger, generated what appeared to be golden dust into two massive shields to block enemy fire. Gold dust. Spartan shield. Goldmine's magic is the ability to use the dust of gold to form weapons or objects for combat. Goldmine walked towards a group of Alvarez Knights, his shields blocking the fire from their magic staffs. With a heave of his right arm, he pushed the right gold shield forward. The edge of the shield stabbing into the knight's stomach and nailing him to a rock wall. And the second one was sent spinning in the air, decapitating two startled knights. Charge. Coming rushing in on magic mobiles towards the Quattro Cerberus Guild, were two battalion of Alvarez Knights, with some on the roof blasting them with energy bolts from magic staffs. Clapping his hands together, his eyes shining gold underneath his sunglasses. Gold Hound. Formed out from the gold dust, was a massive tree-headed dog. Wild. Goldmine smirked as his Cerberus hound chewed up the magic mobiles, along with the knights on board in an instant. Makarov may have been the star of our old group, but the rest of us weren't slouches. You rock, master. Rocker cheered as he charged with his whirlwind fists through a wave of incoming knights. Now that's wild. Bacchus howled at seeing their master's skills. To them this was a rare treat. In an instant however, the gold-hounded Cerberus exploded before their very eyes from a shockwave. And a looming menacing figure walked out, straightening his gloves was none other than Jacob of the Spriggan 12. Old man August is probably gonna be angry that I broke from the group. But sitting still and waiting just isn't my style. So, this is one of the 12 Makarov was bitching about. Goldmine smirked, with a bead of sweat running down his wrinkly old face. Man, he wasn't joking around. Goldhound Goldmine, you had quite the high bounty on you back in the day, old man. Lucky for you I hadn't grown into my current profession just yet. Along with Pegasus Bob, and of course the raging giant Makarov. And Firebird Rob, you made quite the infamous magic team back in the day. Jacob commended the old master, and Goldmine took it as a compliment. Hey, why thank you. It's been a long time, since I heard that old nickname. I actually hate being in the spotlight. Oh, no need for thanks. The Emperor made a study upon all capable mages in Ishgar. And although you didn't qualify for the level of Wizard Saint, you certainly did for S-Class. You aren't that high level of a threat to us to be honest, but in the respect of those from the older generation. I shall grant you a final outstanding battle as a parting gift. Jacob's threat was met with animalistic growls from the Quattro Cerberus Guild members. Goldmine was at a loss for words. He could see the danger before them clear as day. No matter what angle he looked at it from, he would die fighting this man. Even his elite member Bacchus wouldn't last a second against Jacob. Threatening our master. Big mistake. Everyone, let's get wild. Bacchus charged straight ahead, either blinded by the threat before him or he simply didn't care. Bacchus and his gang were halted, all trapped within golden cages. What the? Master. Rocker looked to Goldmine. Let us out, old man. Bacchus snarled as he glared at Jacob. No, like Fairy Tail, like Blue Pegasus, our guild values the meaning of family. And to me, all you crazy kids are my pups. And as the dad, I can't sit by and let my pups get slaughtered. This fight is mine and mine alone. Goldmine glared at Jacob as he advanced towards the assassin. I didn't catch your name, by the way. Goldmine smiled at Jacob. It is Jacob. I am the #1 hitman and assassin in the whole world. And one of the mighty 12. Jacob politely introduced himself with a bow. Jacob, you said you respect old geezers like myself, right? Indeed I do. One must respect their elders. Then this old dog has one request for you. Goldmine raised his arms, generating gold dust around him. Once this is over, swear that you won't lay a hand on these kids of mine. Swear that you won't harm them or kill them. Considering the situation, normally one shouldn't accept such a request. However, since I am so charitable, I shall grant you your request. Today, I won't harm or kill them. But tomorrow, who knows? Jacob gave a sinister smile. Goldmine looked with a glare at Jacob at first, before giving a long and tired sigh. Guess I can't ask for more than that. I am grateful. Oi, old man, whatever you are planning, get the idea out of your head. Bacchus demanded, sounding like a barking dog. We can take him together. Yeah, let us take him down together, master. Rocker agreed, and the rest howled in agreement as well. You damn kids, never shut up. Goldmine gave them what could only be described as a fatherly smile. He gave them a thumbs up, and turned around to face Jacob. The gold dust around Goldmine turned into various weapons, like swords, spears, and even hammers. All sent in a raining hail onto Jacob. Jacob, however, weaved and dodged, shattering some of them with a mere backhand of his fist. Goldmine quickly rushed Jacob, with a raised fist wielding a gold-spiked knuckle-duster. Goldmine swung his fist at Jacob, only for the assassin to catch him by the wrist before he could even reach his face. Jacob in a swift motion tightened his grip. The hold he had on Goldmine's wrist was so strong one could hear the Quattro Cerberus master's bones crack. Fighting through the pain, he threw a second punch with his left fist wielding a second knuckle-duster. This time he connected with Jacob's massive forehead, yet the tall dark assassin didn't even budge an inch. A valiant effort, Jacob commended. Not done yet. Planting his feet onto Jacob's chest, an explosion of gold came from Goldmine's soles, knocking Jacob back and forcing him to let go of Goldmine's wrist. I used my time to create that. Pointing upwards in the sky, Jacob saw that a massive shadow had cast itself over them. Since it was night time, the shadow was barely seen in the dim moonlit night. Hovering in the sky above was a giant cube of pure gold. This is the strongest attack in my arsenal, at least I will go all out. Goldmine swung his fist down, and the gold cube came crashing down. Jacob readied himself, his right hand balling into a fist. Jacob took a deep breath followed by a deep exhale. And with great force and speed, Jacob thrusted his fist upwards and into the golden cube. Sending a massive shockwave tremor through it, the cube itself started to crack open. And finally exploded into gold dust, raining down all around them. Goldmine sighed, not even surprised. Reaching into his pockets he took out a cigar and a lighter. He lit the cigar and puffed on it a few times. Before blowing out the smoke, taking a look at the gold dust raining around him. Well, guess I'm done, Goldmine smiled, despite the situation. You put up quite the struggle. You lasted far longer than I expected, honestly. Jacob twirled his sore wrist around a bit. He reached into the pocket of his blazer. Makes me wonder, where did this resolve come from? Huh, are you just stupid, or deaf? Didn't you hear me earlier? Goldmine blew smoke from his cigar and looked at Jacob with a smirk. These brats are my pups. What kind of man would need a reason to protect his own children? At the sincere words carried with such passion, the wild bunch of the Quattro Cerberus couldn't help but shed tears at their master's words, when they were filled with such heartful compassion. Jacob stood there looking baffled. Hey, such touching words. Jacob took out a gun from his pocket, and pointed it at point-blank range at the head of the smiling Master Goldmine. The Golden Hound, Goldmine. I shall remember you for as long as I live. And with that, Jacob pulled the trigger. Bang! The shot rang through the battlefield, followed by a still silence. All Bacchus, Rocker and the rest of the Quattro Cerberus could hear, was the thud noise made when Goldmine's body hit the ground. Bacchus gaped in disbelief, trembling with grief and anger. Old man, he cried out in agony. All of the Quattro Cerberus sat still, the golden cages around them falling apart. All of them frozen in their grief and unable to move. All except for Bacchus. Damn you! Bacchus charged at Jacob. I gave my word, not to harm or kill you. In honor of your master, I shall do just that. With a mere poke to Bacchus' forehead, Bacchus froze and fell to the ground. Don't worry, I merely paralyzed him. He didn't feel any pain from that, he should be up and going soon enough. A minute or two give or take. Jacob assured the frightened-looking bunch of Quattro Cerberus. Well, I really must get going. Have a good night now. Jacob waved as he strolled away casually. Rocker went to pick up Bacchus, all glaring at the walking form of Jacob with contempt. But neither having the courage to attack the man, all they could do was weep over the fallen corpse of their master. Their grief was short-lived, as Knight of the Alvarez Empire continued their assault. Jacob may have promised not to harm them today, but the Alvarez Knights made no such promise. And the Quattro Cerberus decided to take their anger and grief out on these knights. Meanwhile, far up north of Fiori, with the forces of Bosco and Seven mostly annihilated, Sting's squad made a valiant effort against the invading forces of the Empire. With Sting and Rogue leading the aerial assault with the help of their Exceed companions Frosh and Lecter. The Dragon Slayer duo using their destructive magic to tear holes in any enemy aircraft. While on the ground, things were taking a far more hectic turn. Many of the squad members were dropping like flies. Blood exploding out from their throats and their eyes. Run, it's the Grim Reaper. The wails and cries of terror echoed through the area, and admits it all having been pushed over by her fleeing comrades. Yukino laid alone in the cold snow, a cold nervous sweat running down her face as indeed what one could only describe as the Grim Reaper stood before her. Bloodman of the Spriggan 12 stood alone as he glared at the fleeing enemy soldiers. His eyes glowing bright mystic purple. What made it more frightening was that their attacks had no effect on him. It just passed straight through, any that touched him ended up choking on their own blood. Pitiful humans, Bloodman's gruff-sounding voice huffed. Not even having noticed Yukino laying there, Bloodman nearly walked over her had it not been for letting out a small yelp. Oh, didn't see you there. Bloodman chuckled, seeing Yukino as a less worthy being than even those that tried to flee from him. She felt lower than any kind of bug in the presence of this monster. Trembling, unable to move or stand up, she merely cowered before Bloodman, closing her eyes awaiting her fate. Hold it, charging in, was surprisingly Jenny from Blue Pegasus, accompanied by a handful of wizards bearing the Blue Pegasus emblem, having come as reinforcements. Jenny utilizing a red armored battle suit, rockets shooting out from her wrists and towards Bloodman. Useless. Bloodman scoffed as the rockets passed through his body, which now looked kind of dark and foggy like a mist. Suddenly, however, a beam of pure light shined into Bloodman, the light causing his body, despite its mist-like form, to burn. Bloodman moved away from the light. Now, don't you go bullying my little darlings. Coming flying in, riding on a majestic white stallion with wings. An actual Pegasus, riding this majestic beast, was none other than Master Bob of Blue Pegasus. The wings of the Pegasus unleashing the burning light that annoyed Bloodman. Master. Jenny brightened up, as Bob descended onto the battlefield with his Pegasus. Seems we have quite the troublemaker on our hands. Pulling on the railings of the Pegasus, the horse reacting to the dark energy emitting from Bloodman. A human, able to ride a holy beast like the Pegasus. Bloodman looked somewhat baffled, that a human was able to ride such a holy mythological creature. I could smell it from a mile away. You are an unholy creature. You shouldn't even exist on this earth. Master Bob's smile faded as it turned into a glare. What is more, the wings of the Pegasus spread, shielding Yukino and Jenny along with the Blue Pegasus members. I can sense your intent to kill these cute little darlings. That is something I cannot allow. And how do you plan on stopping me? Pegasus, although capable of releasing holy-like magical energy, is not enough to stop me. What is more, you are just a vulnerable. Bloodman vanished in a flash, appearing with his claw raised to decapitate Bob. Yet like his opponents couldn't hit him, Bloodman merely phased straight through Bob. What? My magic allows me to phase through objects, attacks and people alike. Bob's declaration was met with a mere scoff, as Bloodman charged at him again, yet he once again phased through. You cannot hit me. Who said that was my goal? Bloodman cackled, having left behind a thin dark mist. Bob instantly noticed what it was. Bane particles. Bob looked on full alarm, feeling already the ether nano in his body depleting. This is bad. Bob coughed up a puddle of blood, although unlike ordinary blood it looked thicker and darker. Master. Jenny, unbeknownst to the danger, attempted to rush to her master's aid along with the Blue Pegasus members. No, Bob warned, halting them in their tracks. Now it made sense to Bob why people had been dropping like flies around Bloodman. This monster's body was made out of Bane particles. Just by being in his presence had poisoned them, to the point where their bodies caved. Those poor darlings, having to suffer such a horrendous fate, and now he was infected. What did more, these particles worked better than the standard version. Bob's organs were already beginning to liquefy. Master, what's wrong? Jenny looked confused. Bane particles, he is made out of Bane particles. Relay this intel to headquarters. Run, all of you. Bob ordered. But what about you? Yukino asked. Don't you worry about me, sweetie. I am going to keep Mr. Creepy here occupied. Bob was panting, trying to control his rapid increasing breathing. Pegasus, get them out of here. And make sure to look for a new worthy rider, worthy of the name Blue Pegasus. Bob charged straight into Bloodman, pushing him back. Fool. Bloodman, seeing no need to dematerialize himself from this joke of a threat. With a swift move of his claw, he stabbed his hand through the Blue Pegasus master. Master. Jenny cried out, attempting to reach out. Although the Pegasus snatched her up, spreading its wings, generating a massive light surrounding itself, Jenny and the members of Blue Pegasus along with Yukino. They could only look on, barely seeing the scene unfolding through the blinding light. Although from the shadows, they could make out that Bob was ripped in half by Bloodman. The members of Blue Pegasus cried at the death of their master, when suddenly the Pegasus teleported along with all of them. For Yukino and the members of Blue Pegasus, the scenery changed from the snowy forest with the horrific Bloodman into the camp Sting's squad had made up north of Fiore's mountains. Jenny fell to her knees, as the Pegasus before her vanished, leaving behind a single feather from its majestic wings. And back in the forest, the snow was stained red with blood. The mauled body of Bob tossed into a corner of the woods. And Bloodman giving a tiresome sigh as he marched on through the dense woods looking for more victims. Meanwhile, back within the port town of Harjin, Kagura's squad were on their last leg. They had been pushed further away from the town, and almost to the very edge of it. Richard, Sawyer, Sho, Wally and Miliana were all panting, and nearly depleted of energy. And standing tall over them, was Demaria's second-in-command Linda. As Demaria-sama would say, you all fell rather short. Linda switched the grips of her two short swords, whilst glaring down at the miserable bunch before her. Sawyer's speed had proven to be useless against her. Richard was already injured and now covered in even more cuts and wounds. Sho lay beaten and panting over his shredded deck of playing cards. Wally and Miliana were the only ones left standing. And Linda had surrounded them with more than 10 of her shadow doppelgangers. Stepping up next to Linda, looking down on their beaten forms, were the revived Historia Tensei warriors, Zero, Ikaruga, Fukuro and Vidaldus Taka. You two lousy worms, you let that bastard Jalal kill me. Zero snarled at them, fury burning in his voice as he came looking for vengeance. Seems Jalal's failure of former minions need to be disposed of. My, such a tragic fate. Ikaruga mused as she sang her last words. Guys, the space around them turned black, and Sho, Wally and Miliana all cried out in pain as they were beaten whilst blinded by the darkness. I'm sorry, all Simon could do was apologize as he was forced to beat down on his 3 former comrades. Simon. Sho was visibly shaking, the sight of their friend who died 8 years ago bringing up a lot of memories. Why, you are supposed to be dead. Miliana was nearly brought to tears. They all had heard of Simon's gruesome fate from Urza. And how a hypnotized Jalal killed him. They all are supposed to be dead, Wally corrected. And we are, although this spell is rather interesting. This enemy of yours seems to know how to bring the dead back to this realm. I have never felt stronger. Zero was grinning like a madman, feeling the endless pool of magic power residing in his body. The downside is being told what to do, of course. But as long as we get our revenge, I honestly don't mind. Ikaruga held her blade up to Miliana's chin. Her eyes, however, looking at Linda. You are with the one controlling us, correct? Mind filling us in? You are mere slaves meant to serve His Majesty and the Alvarez Empire. Just do what Neinhardt tells you. Linda responded, and Zero growled at the tone of her voice, and at being called a slave. How dare you? I am Zero, master of the Oración Cease. I am no one's slave. Zero's body stopped moving, his movement halted by Nineheart. Zero, haven't you learned? I can easily cast you aside when I so wish. Nineheart's chilling voice rang in the back of Zero's head, making the former master of Oración Cease quake in his boots. Not out of fear, but anger at being forced to obey someone. The night of the full moon shined upon them, as war and destruction rained down all around them. All the Historia Tensei warriors present were given a simple order, one that all but Simon had a problem obeying. Kill them. Hey, rock on baby. Vidaldus sang loudly, his guitar playing, forcing his hypnotized warriors to move in on them. Amongst those hypnotized were Beth, Urania, Risley from Mermaid Heel. All looking rather pale with a lot of dark gothic makeup and loose revealing clothes. Yeah, slice and dice 'em. This is your final night alive, Ikaruga sang with her sweet voice, yet her eyes and smile made her seem all the more menacing. She raised her blade up high, ready to decapitate Miliana. Not on my watch, sweetheart. A blade sliced straight through Ikaruga, right down from her head and all the way down. Ikaruga gasped as she was split in two down the middle. Miliana is my little adorable child, I cannot let you harm her. Towering over them, even over Zero, stood the Amazonian-like woman, master of Mermaid Heel, and member of the council, Beatrice. Her long purple hair tied into a bun, and her body cladded in golden plates of armor. With mermaid decorations on the shoulder pads. Purge. In an instant, a pillar of light exploded from Ikaruga's body, completely destroying her reanimated body. Thus, her soul having nowhere to cling to, and returned to the afterlife. Ikaruga. Vidaldus gasped at how quickly his boss had been defeated. Zero launched a blast at Beatrice, only to find it redirect itself into Fukuro instead. The owl-headed man letting out a hoot as his body was reduced into nothing. Before Zero could register what happened, he was met with a spin kick to the face, by Eric, formerly known as Cobra. You too, Zero growled, seeing two more of his traitorous guild members here. Macbeth and Eric had both accompanied Beatrice here as reinforcements. Long time no see, father. Macbeth spoke sarcastically at seeing the man who had made him believe he was his father all those years. Fukuro now as well, Vidaldus shook, seeing even his hypnotized girls backing away in fear. What else is to be expected? These girls are all a part of Mermaid Heel, they know their master's power. And you? Beatrice glared at Vidaldus, her gaze filled with anger and disgust. You turned my adorable darlings into delinquents. Why yeah, what are you going to do about it? Vidaldus regained his confidence. No way you would even dream of hurting them. To this, his hypnotized warriors gained courage and approached Beatrice with the intent to kill. Beatrice remained calm, her expression remaining stoic, which brought a nervous feeling to Vidaldus. He couldn't help but think. She wouldn't, right, which was obvious by the way he was shaking. Hey, don't worry, I wouldn't dream of harming a hair on their heads. Beatrice smirked, which caused Vidaldus to look slightly alarmed. Mermaid magic, Beatrice uttered. Siren song. Beatrice held her dominant hand to her chest, and began singing in what could only be described as utterly divine. Her voice was harmonic and calming, like the view of the still ocean during the sunset. Such beauty, such perfection. Vidaldus stared in awe. In his vision, Beatrice looked like an actual mermaid. The hypnotized members of Mermaid Heel remained frozen on the spot, the singing voice of their master putting them in some sort of trance. Their skin regaining their original color, and their gothic look altering back to their standard outfits. Her marvelous singing voice even started to reach the knights of the Alvarez Empire. All within her range, began walking towards her, entranced by her beauty and her voice. Vidaldus, although not affected in the same way as the knights being reanimated and all. His inner musician couldn't help but appreciate such a beautiful singing voice. My, Beatrice smiled, finding herself surrounded by her adoring fans that were the knights from the Empire. So many wonderful strong-looking men, seductively she pulled one towards her. Want to help me? Why yes, anything. The whole crowd cheered. Destroy him. She nodded towards Vidaldus, finally taken out of his trance. Finding himself surrounded by the Alvarez Knights, all ganging up on him. Vidaldus tried to use his massive hair to absorb the blows, yet eventually he was overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. Bombarded with an endless wave of magic blast attacks, to the point his body was completely vaporized. Simon stood still at seeing the Trinity Raven destroyed in an instant. Miliana, Sho, Wally and Beatrice eyed him. Simon wouldn't get out of this mess alive, then again it was a good thing for him now. Can't have you rest just yet. I still need you. Nineheart's voice rang inside his head. Gee guys, looks like I'm leaving, Simon uttered, his hands forced into generating a speck of darkness. Simon, wait, you need to know. Kagura-chan, she's, just as Miliana was to inform Simon of his younger sister, Simon created a giant cloak of darkness that blinded them all. In the confusion Simon made his escape. I know, Miliana, Simon's voice was left behind like an echo. Simon, Miliana uttered as the darkness around them vanished, letting them see their surroundings again. That man, he was. Beatrice looked to Miliana. Simon, Kagura's big brother. Miliana confirmed. I see, Beatrice uttered, seeming to regret not taking down Simon before he escaped. Wanting to spare Kagura the potential pain of having to fight her dead brother. Amazed that you can relax like that, Linda spoke up. Now then, with the Trinity Raven all destroyed, Beatrice looked towards Linda, who cautiously looked at the Mermaid Heel Master. Flipping her two short swords in the palm of her hands. Time to deal with this cute little doll. Swinging her blade, Beatrice went into a stance, giving a quick wink to the assassin. Out from Beatrice's own shadow, popped out the doppelganger of Linda. In a swift motion, without even needing to look, Beatrice decapitated the doppelganger with her blade in an instant. She's strong, was all Linda could think, as she couldn't even see Beatrice make a move before it was too late. Not only that, she felt the level of magic power within her. Linda made the first move, and attempted to penetrate the Amazonian woman's defenses. Creating multiple doppelgangers of herself, running in circles around Beatrice. The Mermaid Heel Master remaining on guard, and looking rather carefree. Her eyes scanning the movements of Linda and her doppelgangers as they passed her line of sight one by one. The first two doppelgangers of Linda attacked from the side. Beatrice parried the blade of the doppelganger on the right, knocking her off balance and in a swift motion slicing the one on the left in half. More started to charge in, but Beatrice moved like a dancer. Countering and blocking various attempted strikes from Linda and her doppelgangers. Despite being alone, Beatrice went on the offensive. Her swings were faster than lightning, and as strong as that of a beast. Just one strike from Beatrice was enough to shatter Linda's defenses. Your skills with the sword are impressive, my dear. Beatrice complimented the little assassin. And in the next moment Beatrice's sword cut straight through Linda's dual-wield short swords like butter, and thus through her. Linda stood in silence. She lowered her arms and dropped the handles of her blades. With Linda having been cut down, her doppelgangers vanished one by one. When the last doppelganger had vanished, Linda fell to her knees and in the awaiting arms of Beatrice. You gave it everything you had, child. Beatrice comforted her fallen opponent, gently stroking her cheek. Would Lady Demaria be proud of me? Linda gasped, weakly reaching out to Beatrice. Beatrice looked with some pity. She did not enjoy killing anyone. But she understood warfare, she knew war and what it brought and what it meant. She would. Beatrice spoke to assure her enemy. Linda smiling, shedding a tear even as she gasped a few more times, until she died in Beatrice's arms. A familiar scene playing from a distant memory, Beatrice held a dead man in her arms. Her first love, looking dried up like a mummy in her arms. Giving a sigh, Beatrice closed the eyes of the dead Linda. In the background, Macbeth, Eric, Richard and Sawyer stood to fight their former master, Zero. Do you worms honestly think you can defeat me? Have you forgotten the fear I brought into your hearts? Zero cackled like a madman at seeing his former subordinates standing before him. You've been dead a long time, old man. Things have changed, Sawyer boldly declared. We shall see. Zero smirked, holding his hands behind his back. A dark rotating sickening green energy blast generating in the palm of his hands. Dark Capriccio. Thrusting his hands forward, Zero blasted forward a spinning wave of dark green magical energy cloaked in fire. Richard leapt into the fray, liquefying the ground beneath him, twisting the ground to take on Zero's blast. Zero's attacks drilled straight through the liquid ground and towards Richard. Reflector. Macbeth reflected Zero's attack aside into a crowd of Alvarez Empire Knights. Whilst Sawyer charged like a rocket at Zero, landing a good blow or two into his former master. Then Zero punched his fist down. Dark gravity. A force of gravity pushed Sawyer face first into the ground, immobilizing him. See, nothing has changed. Zero smirked and chuckled at their attempts. Zero twisted his body around, and shot a dark green magic bullet from his fingertip towards Eric. In response, Eric easily avoided, twisting his body aside to avoid the blast. Seems you forgot, I can hear you. Eric generated a dark wave of magical poison energy around his dragon-scaled claws. Poison Dragon. Twin Fang. Rotating his body, Eric slashed his poison energy-covered claws into Zero's chest. Ripping through his body. If Zero had a human body, one would see his ribcage now. However, as a reanimated body, Zero was left with a mere dark hole in his chest that slowly regenerated like nothing happened. I haven't forgotten a thing, Cobra. Just like I haven't forgotten your weaknesses. Zero, stretching his arms out, created portals of darkness, unleashing what appeared to be waves of dark spirits of deceased people. Darkness Banshee Shriek. The spirits let out such a loud shrieking, deafening howl. And for Eric, it was much worse due to his enhanced hearing. AARRRRGGHHHHH. Eric covered his ears in pain as he fell to his knees, and was met with a kick to his stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Dark Rondo. Exploding around Zero, was a massive blast of the same sickening dark green energy. The blast dragged away Eric, Richard, Sawyer and Macbeth. Cobra, Midnight, Hotai, and Racer, I will drag you all into the darkest abyss. Zero cackled like a madman. What followed was a slashing noise, and getting flung before Zero's eyes was his own severed arm. It was Beatrice, kneeling down with her blade readied. She slashed away at Zero's other arm, and swiftly span her body around, slashing Zero's upper body clean off from his lower body. With Zero cut down by Beatrice, Zero's magic attack vanished and the 4 former Oración Cease members fell to the ground. You want redemption, right? That is what you and Jalal strive for. Beatrice asked Macbeth, Eric, Sawyer and Richard. Then overcome your demons, right here and now. Standing firm and tall, letting Zero regenerate himself. She was set on letting the former Oración Cease members themselves destroy their former master. By the looks of it, she wouldn't help them any further. Macbeth, Eric, Sawyer and Richard picked themselves up, glaring at their former master who had gotten back on his feet. Although Zero's focus was on the still calm Amazonian-like woman who had cut him down. You bitch, you got some nerve, Zero smiled, looking to fight Beatrice. We are your opponents. Sawyer clashed into Zero, kneeing him in his back. Although due to his body, Zero wasn't injured nor did he feel pain. Our camaraderie has grown beyond the greed you infested us with. We are now bound together by the force of love. Richard liquefied the ground around Zero, enwrapping him within it like a straitjacket. Love, oh, you poor fools. Zero, with a mighty heave of his body, broke free from his binds. I will drown your so-called love in a pit of despair. Genesis Zero. A wave of darkness erupted from his fingertips, as Zero unleashed a wave of phantoms seeking to devour all their souls. The sound of the phantoms' moans rang through the area, and only drowned out by Zero's mad cackling laughter. As you said, as you know our weaknesses, we know yours in return. Macbeth, copying Zero's movements, generating darkness from his fingertips. Genesis Zero. Unleashing a wave of phantoms, Macbeth countered Zero with his own version of Zero's strongest spells. Each of their phantoms clashed together and wrestled each other for power. Despite the situation, Zero smiled and cackled. Midnight, well done my boy. You have even mastered my Genesis Zero. I knew there was a reason I looked at you as my own son. Zero cackled with a strange sense of pride, although his pride was drowned out by his rage. Which angers me further, at your betrayal. The name is Macbeth. Macbeth snarled at Zero for still calling them by their nicknames during their times in the Oración Cease. That's right, keep him pinned down, Macbeth. Eric leapt from above, inhaling his breath with a wave of poison. Poison Dragon. Roar. Unleashing a mighty breath attack into Zero, Eric and Macbeth's combined attacks nullified Zero's spell. The breath attack from Eric, tearing through Zero's reanimated body, ripping him to shreds. Why you brats dare? Zero grunted. Then Macbeth's Genesis Zero came over him like a tsunami wave. The wave of phantoms drowning the cackling madman. The phantoms dug into Zero's body, ripping open his reanimated corpse and latching onto his soul. The corruption of the darkness from the phantoms devoured at Zero's soul. H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H. You fools will never be rid of me. I made you. You are mine. Zero's cackling laughter brought terrifying shivers down their spines, yet they stood firm and watched, as the phantoms devoured at Zero's souls. Zero's laughter grew weaker and weaker, as his spirit was destroyed by the phantoms. Once the phantoms had fully eaten away at Zero's soul, the madman's cackling laughter finally came to an end. And like ghosts the phantoms vanished into thin air. Macbeth and Eric fell to their knees, supported up by Sawyer and Richard. That better be the last we see of him, Sawyer sighed in relief at the defeat of Zero. May that crazy bastard find some sort of peace, Eric hissed underneath his breath. Oh, perhaps they have earned their second chance, Beatrice hummed, looking at the former members of the fallen dark guild the Oración Cease. Huh, Beatrice flinched, as from the corner of her eye, she saw an entire incoming fleet of Alvarez cruiser warships coming by both sea and air. Her mind drifting over to her ace guild member, and the leader of the Harjan defense squad. Where are you, Kagura-chan? Her eyes looking over the port town of Harjan. In the dead of the night, the fire burning through the town shined brightly like a massive lantern. The sound of clanking metal came from a crater down by the port of Harjan. Kagura and Demaria were clashing their blades at intense speed. Getting tired on me, sweetheart? Demaria taunted, having suffered no injuries, even her clothing hadn't been cut from Kagura's blade. Yet Kagura was panting, winded and out of breath, her body riddled with cuts, her kimono cut around the sleeves and lower area. And her arms having several thin small cuts, her back having also been cut in her waist along with her thighs. I made sure not to scratch that pretty face of yours. Shut up, Kagura grunted, Demaria's taunting really starting to get to her. Kagura held her blade high, her aura intensifying. From the weight of her aura, the very space around them started to tremble. The rocks vibrating on the ground before their feet, rising up into the air around them. Instead of looking to counter, or block, Demaria welcomed the challenge. Awaiting the blow with open arms. It was like she was daring Kagura to see if she could hurt her. As displayed by her mocking smirk and demeanor. Mermaid style, depths of the sea. A massive magic circle formed above them, and Demaria found herself being pushed down to her knees. Her face looking in bewilderment, Kagura wasn't aiming for a strike. She used her magic to increase the very gravity around Demaria. I can't move, Demaria thought to herself, noticing that Kagura despite the gravity moved like it wasn't there. The depths of the ocean, the deeper you go the more pressure. However, that pressure does not apply for the inhabitants of the sea. Like mermaids, Kagura leapt to Demaria, her blade thrusting forward aiming for her head. However, in a mere instant as Demaria clicked her teeth together, Demaria's head was tilted to the side. She moved that fast in my gravity. Kagura widened her eyes, her blade having cut into Demaria's right cheek. It shouldn't be possible, Kagura couldn't even see Demaria move. No one should be able to move that fast while under 500 tons of pressure. Once again Demaria clicked her teeth together, and before Kagura knew it Demaria's blade had pierced her sides. Kagura spat out blood, holding her hand over her cut. Indeed, that may be true for normal people. However, to those who defy logic as myself, it isn't a big deal. Demaria smirked, dragging her right thumb across the cut Kagura left on her cheek. Demaria sucked on her blood-stained thumb. Demaria hummed in a pleasure's tone. How long has it been since I had this feeling? The feeling of blood bumping from my beating heart at such a rate. The feeling of shivers running through my very being. Demaria held herself tight, her body quaking in pleasure with a creepy smile plastered onto her face. Kagura flinched, cold sweat running down her head, starting to feel a bit nervous. Applying pressure on the wound at her side, and tightening the obi around her waist to stop the bleeding. Kagura stood firm and tall, her eyes glaring and analyzing Demaria. How did she move despite being under my gravity magic? She said something about defying logic itself. Still, this isn't the first she has been able to move at great speed. Demaria vanished before Kagura's very eyes. The spooked swordswoman of Mermaid Heel frantically looked around, when suddenly the sensation of Demaria's warm breath blowing down her neck. Kagura frantically jumped away, seeing Demaria behind her. So jumpy, Demaria teased. She's toying with me. Kagura grinded her teeth in frustration. Kagura's heartbeats were getting unsteady, her breathing more frantic as a nervous feeling started to overcome her. She struggled not to let herself get overcome with fear, knowing Demaria would love it. So, should we get this show on the road? Demaria snickered, despite Kagura's gravity still pushing her. Demaria thrusted her blade forward at Kagura, the massive blade moving as flashes of gold, and at such speed it appeared as more than 10 blades flying towards Kagura. Kagura weaved and dodged, noticing Damaria's movements switched between restrained from the increased gravity, to blitzing her and nearly stabbing her. Kagura with her lightning-fast reflexes was barely able to block the lethal strike from Damaria. Her nimble and bendy body made Kagura able to move around like none other. She was quite flexible and managed to weave Damaria's slashes. Yet Kagura knew, Damaria was only playing around. If the Spriggan warrior princess got serious, she would without a doubt be dead by now. Taking a leap, Kagura swiftly slashes her blade down. Cutting Damaria's shoulder, the warrior princess managed to avoid the lethal slash just in time like always. Damaria did look a bit surprised Kagura had managed to cut her again, and Kagura used her momentum to rush Damaria. Using the gravity to sink the ground beneath Damaria's feet, Kagura quickly slashed her sword around aiming to kill Damaria. Instead of being met with the sound of groaning flesh getting cut open, Kagura was met with the sound of clanking metal. Staring in surprise as Damaria had a dagger appear in her mouth out of nowhere, blocking Kagura's blade. Kagura noticing the sheet on Damaria's shoulder which held a dagger before was empty. Damaria and Kagura leapt away from each other. Kagura was panting, looking wary. "So that's it, huh?" Kagura uttered, having discovered the secret behind Damaria's ability. That explains a lot, her mind going over the weird situations that didn't make any sense which had occurred during this battle. The airships having occurred out of nowhere in the sky, Damaria having teleported across the battlefield making it appear as speed. "You can stop time." Damaria smirked with glee, seeing her body covered in wounds and cuts. She rubbed her hand across her wounds, letting out a sickening giggle. Feeling the burning sensation from the various cuts in her body, made her quiver with joy. "Time and space are under my control. That is why none of you have any hopes of defeating me. Although it is quite fun to see you all try." Kagura steadied herself. Could such a foe even be beaten? No, there is a secret to her magic ability. There were various cases where Damaria could have used her ability to dodge Kagura's attacks. There were moments Damaria could have used her ability to critically injure or kill Kagura. There must be some conditions she must hold for time to remain frozen. Otherwise, she would have ended my entire squad in an instant. Kagura shivered imagining Damaria slaying all of her squad mates and comrades, by freezing time and slashing their throats open as they were frozen. Such a fearsome foe, can she only hold time frozen for so long? In that case, she was only able to hold it frozen for a few seconds at best to avoid my attacks. Kagura thought as despite Damaria's time ability, Kagura had landed several attacks at Damaria with her blade. Still trying to wrap your head around it, Damaria smiled at Kagura, who was nearly at her wit's end here. "I think I understand, that is why, this attack will end it." Kagura glared at Damaria, steadying herself in a defensive stance. The magic circle in the sky above them expanding into great size, adding to the pressure of gravity. "My blade, the archenemy, is so powerful it required a total of 3 seals to keep its power tamed. The first seal was broken, when I took the blade long ago from an ancient temple. The second seal was the sheet of the blade itself. And the third seal." Looking around, Damaria noticed only herself and her soldiers were affected by this increased gravity. The sky itself turned into a shade of light purple, as the light from Kagura's magic circle and its power dyed the night sky. "Oh, this is your big finisher. Nice." Ethernano blade, Kagura's blade was cloaked in a bright blue energy. Raising her blade above her head, followed by dark burst, and again, added to it a flow of darkness. Using the magic she learned from Urza, as well as the ability of her deceased brother Simon, she combined the two abilities to her blade. The final seal shall come unleashed, pulling off a sealing tag of sorts attached to the hilt of her blade. The force around Kagura felt massive, the sheer amount of power unleashed from her archenemy sword created strong winds, tearing through the ports of the town, as well as rallying up the ocean, making it rise into tsunami waves. The waves clashed into the town, dragging away Alvarez knights into the deep dark abyss of the sea. Oh, shit, with this power she could be a member of the 12 herself. Damaria stood in awe, looking at how the very land around them was reacting to Kagura unleashing the full power of her archenemy. "Nice, nice." Damaria cackled at the challenge. Around her own blade, Damaria created a form of pure golden light. The light shined so bright it could be described only as utterly divine. "Here I come." Kagura gave a mighty swing with her blade, the force and intensity even tearing through the sleeves of her kimono. and shredding her arms a bit in a violent torrent of cuts from the wind. Archenemy final stage, Mountain Splitter. Blade of Chronos. Kagura unleashed a mighty wave of darkness with blue light flashes coming from inside. The wave itself towered beyond the clouds, and the winds unleashed from it tore straight through the ground. It was cutting up the very land itself. And Demaria with her glowing golden blade, jumped right at it counter it. Demaria's blade clashed with the storm slash wave unleashed by Kagura's finisher. The wind shredding through Demaria's armor around her arm like nothing, it started making ripples in her clothing, cutting into her skin. Yet Demaria just kept on smiling, with utter joy over having found such an interesting opponent. Demaria's blade was wavering under the pressure. Kagura's attack even managed to pierce through the magic cloaked around it. And thus, Demaria's blade broke in half. Quickly acting, Demaria's teeth clicked. Kagura, having kept a close eye on Demaria, knew that is what she did to begin freezing time. Even if you freeze time, you won't manage to avoid the blast in time before time resumes to move. Kagura's wave slashed forward, creating a scar in the land of the port town and out into the ocean. The water split itself open, dividing itself into two giant walls of water. Kagura's attack kept storming through, all the way until one could see the mainland on the other side. The ocean floor was left with a nasty scar, that vanished from sight as the waves of the split ocean clashed together once more. Kagura gave a few heavy breaths, clearly drained from that attack. Done, it's over, Kagura panted, closing her eyes for a second. Her eyes shot wide open as the sound of flesh being pierced through rang in her ears. And the burning stabbing pain filled her stomach. Right before Kagura's face, was the smiling face of Demaria. Having suffered a few minor injuries, yet none that were lethal. Arg, Kagura coughed up a puddle of blood, as she was starting to bleed internally as well. How? Why you shouldn't have been able to keep time frozen for that long, Kagura grunted as she glared into Demaria's eyes. That's what you thought? Hey, adorable. Looking down, Kagura saw not only had Demaria stabbed her, she had done so using Kagura's archenemy. I will let you in on a secret. I can keep time frozen for as long as I want. However, I can only keep it frozen as long as I don't come into contact with anyone. The moment I touch someone, time starts moving again. And then, I have to wait a bit before I can stop time again. Flash towards earlier, when Demaria had frozen time in the face of Kagura's finisher. The attack itself had stopped before her, the birds in the sky remained frozen on the spot. The waves of the sea remained frozen like a painting, drops of water frozen midair around her. The laws of physics did not apply in this world, gravity didn't mean anything. Demaria flew herself over Kagura's attack and gracefully landed on the other side. Skipping like a happy child, Demaria approached the frozen Kagura while humming in a merry tune. Seems this is it. Oh well, it's been fun. Demaria stood right in front of the frozen Kagura, plucking Kagura's archenemy out from her grasp. And proceeds to stab Kagura with it, to which time began moving again. Kagura's right eye was twitching, she began looking rather pale. Why you? Kagura started to feel a small sensation of fear in the face of Demaria. She needed to escape somehow, and relay this intel of Demaria's abilities to HQ. No, if she tried to run, Demaria would just chase her and catch her easily. Now then, shall I put a leash on you? My new darling pet. Holding an actual dog collar, Demaria approached her with a gentle smile. Kagura-chan, Kitten Blast. Coming charging in to aid her friend, was Miliana. The cat girl shooting a torrent of orange ropes at Demaria. Demaria's expression turned grim, as she looked annoyed at Miliana's interference. Miliana, run. Kagura would rather become Demaria's pet, than for Miliana to die. Although as she shouted her warning, Kagura let out a gasp, only to see Demaria already having stabbed Miliana with a dagger whilst she was still midair. Don't interfere in our special moment. Demaria glared a hateful look at Miliana. Miliana. Kagura let out a blood-curdling scream. Water style. Water shark bomb jutsu. Flame gods. Bellow. Blasting towards Demaria, was a shark made out of water that exploded into her face. The explosion knocking the archenemy out from Demaria's hand. Demaria still needed to wait a bit until she could stop time again. Following the water shark bomb, was a wave of black flames. Having finished off a good chunk of the Alvarez Knights, and the other having slightly recovered from his battle against the Desert King Agil. Kakuzu and Kisame came to the rescue, along with the wood clone of Itachi Uchiha. More playmates. Demaria's face brightened with a smile, sensing the strong presence in Kakuzu. And despite being injured, Kisame still had a chunk of his power left. Despite being a mere clone, this clone wielded some of Itachi's power. Damn, this chick is insanely strong, Kisame whistled out a bit impressed, as with the ability of Samahata he could smell the energy coming from Demaria. She might be amongst the top dogs in the Spriggan 12. Kisame, Itachi, get these two out of here. I will hold her at bay, Kakuzu declared, as at the moment he was the strongest player they had left in Harjin. Itachi's clone grabbed the archenemy, and hoisted Kagura onto his back. And Kisame did the same for Miliana, who was unconscious. I will come back the moment I get them to safety, Itachi's clone declared as he and Kisame jumped away. Ah, they left. Demaria looked a bit saddened, but instead focused on Kakuzu. And they took my new pet. Oh well, I will make sure to find her once the war is over. I have met many warriors like you, hungry for battle, and a challenge. But behind all that facade, hides the insecure feelings of a little lonely girl. Kakuzu declared, like he could read Demaria like an open book. Huh, Demaria scowled at Kakuzu, aggravated by the looks of it. Itachi, Kagura could barely stay awake, having lost quite a bit of blood. Don't speak, I will take you to Wendy and Sharia. They can heal you. Saving her strength, Kagura closed her eyes and rested her head onto Itachi's back. She needs to stay alive, only she knows the details of that Demaria's abilities. Kisame and Itachi were both aware of how vital the intel Kagura had on Demaria was for the battle. And thus, letting Kagura die was not an option. I know, how is Miliana? Itachi asked, as he wasn't certain of the condition of the cat girl. She will live, it was merely a flesh wound. No vital organs were hit by the looks of it. As Kisame said that, Miliana's face started rising up a bit. Her eyes closed, and her nose sniffing Kisami's scent. She seemed pleased and at ease. There was a bit drool coming from her mouth. Miliana, smelling the fishy scent of Kisame, smiled and began nibbling on the shark man's neck. Yummy fish, she muttered as she nibbled on Kisami's neck. Kisame looked at a loss for words, flinching at Miliana's teeth nibbling into his neck. What the hell? Itachi's clone and Kisame arrived at the edge of Harjin, where Wendy and Sharia were with everyone else. As Master Beatrice had rounded them up to flee at once, seeing a fleet of over 50 Alvarez reinforcement ships coming in by sea and air. Ah, Kagura-chan, Miliana-chan. Beatrice, seeing two of her beloved guild members on Kisame and Itachi's backs, rushed over to them. They had a run-in with one of the 12. Itachi's clone handed Kagura over to Beatrice, who cradled Kagura in her arms like a little baby. I must go. Itachi's clone quickly left to help Kakuzu in fighting Demaria. My poor little darling, Beatrice cooed Kagura in her arms, kneeling down before Sharia, who began healing at the critical injured Kagura. While Wendy was healing Miliana, Itachi arrived at the destroyed port, finding Kakuzu surrounded by Alvarez troops. Itachi quickly had his clone activate the perfect Susanoo, coming crashing down. Just in time to see Demaria having sliced off both of Kakuzu's arms. However, in an unexpected twist for Demaria, Kakuzu simply reattached his arms with black tentacles. Before Demaria could retaliate and commence her attack on Kakuzu, Itachi's wood clone had his perfect Susanoo swoop Kakuzu into his hand. Huh. Go. The others are retreating into Magnolia. Itachi's clone informed Kakuzu, tossing him in the direction towards the edge of town where Kisame, Beatrice and the rest awaited. Could have given me a warning, Kakuzu grumbled over being snatched up so suddenly. Bringing forth his demonic wings, he took flight. Whilst Itachi's clone focused on taking down as many of the incoming Alvarez's ships as possible. Yusaka Magatama, tossing several of the Yusaka beads, Itachi took out a lot of the fleet reinforcements for Demaria, in a massive chain of explosions in the sky, and creating giant water geyser explosions in the sea. The fleet responded with a bombardment of fire at Itachi's clone and the perfect Susanoo. Although the effect the bombardment had on the spectral warrior were non-existent. Can't have you destroy my fleet, Demaria smiled, knowing what was before her was a mere clone. Making her all the more excited to face the real one. Take over, God's soul, Kronos. Retreating out from Harjin, and heading towards Magnolia, was what remained of Kagura's squad, the squad captain unconscious and being carried in the arms of Beatrice. Kagura-chan, Beatrice placed the archenemy into Kagura's arms, the blade resealed into its sheet. Kisame still carried Miliana, who despite being unconscious held onto him and refused to let go, while nibbling on his neck, You a cat sitter now? Kakuzu arrived by air, flapping his demonic wings as he descended upon them. She won't let go. How did things go? Answering Kisami's question, was a massive destructive explosion of light in the form of a pillar. It came from Harjin. The explosion faded, and with it the chakra of Itachi's wood clone. Let's go, we must hurry. Back down in Harjin, Demaria appearing to have longer hair as it was standing up, her body surrounded by a strange glow. Demaria's hair shrunk and fell down, the strange glow around her body vanishing. Before her, was a massive smoking crater that covered nearly half the town. Flakes of wood left from Itachi's clone flew in the wind. Hey, I hereby declared Harjin, as captured. In the name of the Alvarez Empire and the mighty Emperor Spriggan. Demaria claimed victory over Harjin, she was met with cheers from her troops. Rising in the distance behind Demara, was the sun. The first day of the war had ended, and a new day had begun. Longer south of Fiori, in the southern isles of Ishgar, Zirf stood with Inval in a large army behind him. Inval flinched, sensing something approaching. Your Majesty, there is an unidentified object hurling straight for us. Zirf smiled at hearing Inval's warning. Slowly Zirf raised his head, looking into the sky, seeing what resembled a burning flaming meteorite hurling towards them in the morning sky. Only it wasn't a meteorite, it was Natsu Dragneel, carried by his trusted ally and friend Happy. Time to finish this once and for all. Zirf, Natsu roared as he plummeted towards them. I hope you enjoyed this special extra long episode. Thank you for 1000 subs.